Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the State of California Board of Equalization conference call. At this time, all lines are in a listen-only mode. Later, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. If at any time you have a question or wish to make a comment, you may press 1 and then 0. Once again, at any point, if you want to make a comment or ask a question, you may queue up by pressing 1 and then 0. If you need assistance offline, press *0 and an operator will assist you. And as a reminder, today's conference call is being recorded. I would now like to turn the conference over to Chairman Antonio Vasquez. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I will go ahead and ask Ms. Davis to please call the roll.
Good morning, Chairman. Chairman Vasquez?
Present.
Mr. Schaefer?
Present.
Mr. Gaines?
Present.
Ms. Cohen?
Present.
Ms. Stowers?
Present.
A quorum is present, and the board meeting is now called to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would please rise, and we'll begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Ms. Davis, please announce the first order of business.
Our first order of business is an announcement from Acting Chief Board of Proceedings, Henry Nanjo. Mr. Nanjo?
Hi, this is just a reminder. Thank you, Ms. Davis. This is just a reminder to those who wish to make a public comment pursuant to the instructions on the website and on the public agenda notice. Please email Ms. Indu Shirvisan to notify her that you would like to speak. And at that time, you will be put back into mute mode, and we will call you at the appropriate time. There are obviously opportunities to speak after each agenda item and after public comments for matters not on the agenda. So please notify Indu on which item you wish to speak on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call our first item.
Our first item is C1, Public Hearings on Property Taxes, State Assessees Presentations on the Evaluation of State Assessed Properties. Mr. Mike Harris, Acting Chief of the State Assessed Properties Division, is here to present these matters. Mr. Harris?
Good morning, Chairman Vasquez and honorable members. I'm Mike Harris, Acting Chief of the State Assessed Properties Division. This is the second opportunity under board rule where state assessees are allowed to make a presentation to the board in a public setting on matters relating to the valuation of state assessed property. I don't believe we have any presenters this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Harris. Members, do you have any questions?
Member Schaefer here. What happened to Peter Michaels? He was scheduled to speak. Hello?
He originally asked to speak, and he has since declined.
Thank you.
Hearing no others, we will move on. Ms. Davis, please call our next item.
Our next item is item F1, Other Tax Program Non-Appearance Matters, Property Tax Matters Audits. These items do not require contribution disclosure forms. Hearing these two items is a constitutional function of the board. Ms. Stowers will not be participating. These items may be taken separately or in one vote. Mr. Harris, the Acting Chief of State Assessed Properties Division, is here to present these matters. Mr. Harris?
Good morning again. I'm Mike Harris, Acting Chief of the State Assessed Properties Division. Before you, for your consideration, are two property tax audits. I ask for your adoption.
Do I hear a motion to approve the staff recommendation?
So moved.
It's been moved. I will second it. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Vasquez,
Yes.
Member Schaefer,
Yes.
Member Gaines, Member Gaines,
Yes.
Member Cohen,
Aye.
That is all.
So that's unanimous from those that are able to vote on this. Ms. Davis, please call our next item.
We'll now move into the administrative session. The first item is the administrative consent agenda. Item J1 is the approval of the board meeting minutes from March 25th, 2020.
Members, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of March 25th?
Second, Member Schaefer.
So it's been moved and second. Hearing no other comments, can we get a roll call vote?
Member Vasquez?
Yes.
Member Schaefer?
Yes.
Member Gaines?
Aye.
Member Cohen?
Aye.
Ms. Stowers?
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. Ms. Davis, please call the next item.
Our next items are K1 through K5, other administrative matters. The first item is K1, the Executive Director's Report. Executive Director Brenda Fleming will come forward to present each item and the subtopics K1A and K1B. Ms. Fleming?
Thank you, members. Good morning. Chairman Vasquez and honorable members and the public who has joined us, we appreciate that you are here with us today, and we are hopeful that everyone is safe. I am Brenda Fleming, the Executive Director. Members, under normal circumstances, my report would highlight the operational priorities related to property tax projects, recruitments and workforce capacity, budget reports, strategic plans, reports, etc. However, due to the current circumstances, our priorities are centered around the COVID-19 virus. The health and safety of our employees is the top priority, followed by our constitutional and statutory responsibilities to administer BOE's tax programs. Before I begin my updates, I'd quickly like to note what is on the near horizon. At the May meeting, members, it is critical that the following actions be performed. We certainly will follow up with additional information for you on this, but to put it on the radar, at May meeting, the board will adopt the 4R Act ratio. The board will set the unitary values of all state assessees. The board would adopt property tax forms. And while the adoption date can be flexible on the forms, we try to provide updates as early as possible to assist county assessors with their planning and incorporating new forms. At this time, members, the BOE is still in the process of working with the California Assessors Association, their forms committee, subcommittee, to finalize changes to be made to certain forms that were identified by the subcommittee at their meeting in January of 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the subcommittee was not able to have their scheduled meeting at the end of March to finalize these changes, and therefore are finalizing them via emails. This is making the final forms process take a little bit longer than usual, but the work is still proceeding. As I mentioned last month, members, work on items related to COVID-19 has shifted our priorities, and consequently work on some of our operational priorities has been temporarily interrupted. However, staff has done an extraordinary job of adjusting and continues to make progress on operational priorities as well as the many new demands created by COVID-19. I just want to pause again to thank our amazing staff, both BOE and CDTFA, for their response to this emergency and their commitment to our continuity of government responsibilities while still caring for their families. I'm proud to report that we are successfully executing our continuity of government operations plan. For example, we are quickly and successfully have implemented a telework program for all employees. I think at this point everyone is learning Teams, and we appreciate their continued efforts to look for every efficiency. We continue to move forward and meet statutory deadlines. For example, our property tax, county assessed and state assessed deadlines, private railroad car tax rate, which will again take up next month,
Our BOE annual report was submitted last week, and it will soon be going to publishing, and it'll be available also on our website. We're on track with split roll BCP work. The legal department is continuing to focus on rule changes resulting from Senate Bill 791, which is their certificated aircraft bill that was passed last year. We continue to work with our external partners on property tax issues and concerns and have regular and active interactions with CAA. In compliance with the governor's stay-home order, we have implemented our telework program so staff can work from home, and that's going successfully. Despite transitioning from approximately originally 10% to 90% of our staff telecommuting, there continues to be no risk or issues with meeting our constitutional or statutory responsibilities. And again, I just want to applaud staff because they continue to do the lift to make sure that those deadlines and those responsibilities are met. Of course, there have been a few wrinkles, as we expected, little things that we're learning, and we'll continue to put those in our parking lot for ongoing process improvements. For brevity, here are a few items to note to highlight a few accomplishments. The State Assessed Properties Division continues to prepare unitary value indicators for state assessees and expects to deliver them to the board on schedule for the May board meeting. Staff has continued to issue guidance in the form of CAOs, LTAs, and daily responses to inquiries by assessors, taxpayers, and other stakeholders. Work has continued with interested parties on developing guidance for property owned by community land trusts. At this time, members, the legislature is on recess until May 4th or upon the call of the pro tem and or the speaker. Staff will continue to monitor legislative activities and schedules, and we will, of course, keep you informed. The Taxpayers' Rights Advocate is responding to taxpayer calls and inquiries. Inquiries are being tracked and reviewed to help determine what additional information we can provide to assist taxpayers and others during this time. Revenue and Taxation Code Section 616 requires county assessors to annually complete their local assessment rolls by July 1. Section 155 provides, however, that the board or its executive director may extend by 30 days the deadline for any official act by the assessor. In the case of public calamity, the deadline may be extended by 40 days. Section 155 also requires that the executive director inform the board of any such extension at its next regular meeting. This memo is to inform you that the Madera, San Joaquin, Shasta County assessors have been granted a 40-day extension. The San Luis Obispo County assessor originally asked for and was granted a 30-day extension in January of 2020, but now is also granted a 40-day extension. The Del Norte, Monterey, Trinity, and Ventura County assessors have requested and been granted a 30-day extension respectively for completing their 2020 local assessment roll. Understandably, we are continuing to receive requests for extensions from other county assessors, which will be approved. Those will be reported on at our next board meeting in May. Finally, I do want to acknowledge that some requests that we've received, members, as you're asking for additional work and information, will continue to process that information and provide responses to you as timely as we can as we factor all of that into the main priorities. Members, I just like to take any remaining administrative functions offline with you because we're acknowledging that we have quite a bit of interest in our discussions today under the M item, which is our public policy hearing. So out of respect for the broad number of other elected officials, yourselves, other elected officials, and the public who are on the line, I'll conclude for this month's report, and please let me know ongoing if there's any other information that we can provide. Chairman Vasquez, that concludes this month's report.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Flemings. Members, do we have any questions?
Yes, this is Member Gaines.
Go ahead, Mr. Gaines.
I'd just like to have clarity in terms of what our authority is as members of the BOE in trying to provide relief for certainly the county assessors, and to what degree can that help taxpayers ultimately. And I just just heard that we have this opportunity to provide a 40-day extension to the county assessors. Are there other areas that we can provide relief with our current authority?
I'm assuming it's a question for Ms. Fleming.
Yeah, just unmuting my phone. Thank you for your question, Board Member Gaines. We currently do have some areas of authority that are a part of our normal, operational work. Our TC 155, for example, is what we're exercising to give the 30, under normal circumstances and under this calamity situation, 40-day extensions to the assessors and to the AABs. The authorities that we have now are really based upon deadlines that are related to really the assessors mostly, as it relates to materials and actions that are performed by the assessors primarily. One of the things that we'll be talking about as a part of the public policy discussion, sir, and for everyone's benefit, is a little bit more about, where there may be, based upon our existing authorities under things like, RTC 155 or RTC 441, et cetera, part of today's discussion is really to explore that a little bit more so we could hear more about what might be some of the other needs that are out there on a broader scale, and that will give us an opportunity to go back and continue to revisit where we could ask for additional authority. The chairman will be making some comments along with our entire body. We'll have a discussion about letters to the governor's office and others to see what we can do to assist in this situation. But again, just for the record, to the extent that we have existing authority to give some relief or extensions, we are doing so now as a normal part of our operations.
Thank you very much, and I'll be listening throughout the hearing, and I'm sure we're all going to be asking questions on ideas that will be moving forward. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Thank you so much, members.
Good morning, everyone. This is Member Malia Cohen. I hit the 1 then 0 to be recognized. May I be recognized at this time?
You're available. Go ahead, Ms. Cohen.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to express my support for the assessors and their staff that have been tremendously impacted by the pandemic. I want to also ask the Executive Director, Ms. Fleming, her opinion if additional authority may be required to extend the deadlines further than the 40-day extensions allowed for public calamity.
Thank you for that question, Board Member. We appreciate it. One of the things that we'll be looking at is to what degree we can go beyond what's currently articulated in statute. As the statute stands today under RTC 155, Ms. Cohen, it specifically, unfortunately at this point, it specifically says that we can extend it one time. So one of the things that I'm hoping will come out of today's discussion is to the degree that the larger body suggests that more than that 30 or 40-day extension is needing. In other words, if we could do sort of a perpetual, under the circumstances, perpetual extension of the 30 or 40-day extension, it would require legislative action, and what I would be looking for is the board's discussion and board's direction, along with with anyone else who's listening who could be a part of that, to see to what degree we might be able to get some leniency on that, whether that be through an executive order or through legislation. As it stands today, ma'am, we're limited to a one-time extension of a 30 or 40-day extension for both the assessors under RTC 155 and the local assessment appeals boards. But I look forward to the board's discussion to provide more direction.
I've got a few more questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Does that also mean that we can inquire about the impacts on extending the deadlines for completing the assessment roles beyond the 40-day extension allowed? So
to make sure I'm understanding, if additional extensions were granted, just to clarify, you're asking, then we would determine what the impact of that would be, so that we could, as you know, Ms. Cohen, what we would want to do is look at the broader array of information so that we're best prepared to make a decision.
So is staff
because we certainly, yes, ma'am.
Is staff reviewing this now? I'm curious to know what the timeline is or will be.
And so I think part of what we'll do, Ms. Cohen, is as we open up, because I think many others want to weigh in on this portion of the conversation too. So if I may, ma'am, just
please, yes.
allow the conversation that's going to occur, because that's really where we're here to collect more of that information. And the more information we have, the better we are able to continue our analysis. But yes, ma'am, to answer your specific question, yes, we've been doing analysis on what the impacts would be. For sure. For example, we had one as we're looking into extensions for AABs, trying to look at all the implications of a decision. Because as you know, one decision and you move a date back, it certainly has a ripple effect. So what we are wanting to do is fully understand, what the impact, the scope of those delay or those deadline extensions would be. So in the long run, what we would want to protect is anything directly impacting the taxpayer and the local government, et cetera. So we would absolutely want to make sure we consider all of that, and including this information we'll gather today should really also be supplemental information that we take into consideration.
Okay. Do you have other staff members that are going to speak to this question?
As a part of this afternoon's or this morning's discussion, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I will plant the seed now. I'm curious to know, since you're doing analysis, you've already started the analysis process. I wanted to know what kind of preliminary data that you're finding. Of course, understanding that everything that you say to us, to the board today, is not final. But I would like to know, we've been sheltering in place for 5 weeks or so now, and there's our second board meeting, teleconference, so there's been some time and some distance from the initial shelter-in-place order that really was disruptive in all of our business functions. So what does your analysis say? What can you kind of report out today informally, understanding that this is not a formal analysis? Thank you.
So I just want to be able to restate to make sure that I've captured it. So what are our initial findings showing? Just to confirm, Ms. Cohen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and again, to your point, Ms. Cohen, we definitely will have more discussion on it today. But initially, at this point, it looks like we are at this point operating under the current climate of authorities that we have based upon the current statutes. Our initial analysis, when we went through all of the range of deadlines, gives an indication that any changes that we would need to give, any additional extensions that were not already authorized within our current authority and power to do, any additional changes would either require legislation or an executive order. So to the extent that we currently today have authority by statute or by constitution, we're exercising all of those extensions. We've gone through with very specific review, especially by legal, and I invite Mr. Nanjo and perhaps Mr. Moon to jump in on this conversation also, because they've really gone through to determine sort of line by line if there's any flexibility for us to really sort of push the envelope a little bit more. And at this point, the language in many of the statutes that we're operating on, RTC 155, for example, ma'am, is very specific. The simple language that's stated calls it out very specifically. And so when we've gone through that, legal's done their analysis of that, there isn't much flexibility. It would literally require either, again, legislative changes or an executive order to give us any additional authority.
Thank you.
So,
I'm
sorry, I have
another question,
a follow-up. Yes, a follow-up to that. So the governor is talking about bringing us back to work, and I just wanted to make sure that the team is in place working on a strategy to do just that, and with the health and safety of our teams as the number one priority in developing the strategy. Are you prepared,
Yes, ma'am.
Go back.
For us, yes, ma'am, we absolutely are. And as you know, and members and the broader audience, as you know, as a government agency, we have been early on identified as essential staff, And so continuity of government is what we executed, immediately as the governor gave direction to stay-at-home orders and just the state emergency based upon COVID-19's national emergency. So we have been actually working daily. So we have not, while we certainly are doing work differently through teleworking, the actual execution on all of our constitutional and statutory duties have continued. We do have some staff while we're practicing social distancing. We are still practicing the balance of the social distancing and protection of the health and welfare of our employees while still making sure that we're on deck to continue that work. So we've got staff that have been rotating in and out to the extent that the governor lightens that restriction and gives more flexibility of the stay-at-home restriction. We will then absolutely be prepared to bring more staff back into the office so that we can continue the work. So yes, ma'am, to answer your question specifically, we are prepared to resume.
All right. I'm sure that was what I anticipated your answer to be.
Thank
you for that. I wanted to just go back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about the deadlines for completing the assessment roles, considering going beyond 40 days. And one of the examples...
Member Cohen, let me ask you a quick question. Is it possible to hold that until a little bit later and we can bring it back? Only because I was informed that we have several speakers that are on hold that are kind of on a tight schedule, and I don't want to lose them, to make sure that we have the opportunity to hear from the public and especially the speakers that I know you brought as well. If we could just kind of wrap it up.
Yes, this is my last question.
Thank you.
So as I was saying, going back to what we were talking about, completing the assessment roles beyond the 40-day extension, one example that comes to my mind is, and I'm curious to know if this will have a rippling effect as information is delayed to be communicated to many of the county officials, including the Board of Supervisors, for purposes of their budget. As you can imagine, COVID-19 is going to have an impact on every single county and every single budget. And the Board of Supervisors relies on accurate data from our assessors so that they can start their budget process. In San Francisco County, for example, we are going to be starting our budgeting process in September, when normally our budget would have been approved and finalized by July 1st. So, and we are already projecting severe deficit to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So my question really is, how addressing the rippling effect of information delayed to be communicated to county officials for purposes of their budget and revenue calculations, as well as the tax collectors for purposes of preparing the tax bill for the December 10th payment deadline. These are all things that are also in the environment that work squarely in our wheelhouse when it comes to tax bills. So I'm just putting this out there. If you have an answer, that's fantastic. If not, please be prepared to later on in the presentation to just share some details. Thank you.
Okay. No, I appreciate the question and really laying the foundation. This is definitely a great segue to hear from the county assessors and others who boots on the ground really engaged in that. To the extent that our role is supporting the assessors to help support them getting the information that they're needing in terms of business property statements, et cetera. What I'm told, and I don't want to step in the lane of the assessors, who I believe are going to be speaking shortly, as to what the workload looks like for them, both the work that they process, that's inbound work from the taxpayers that they process, and any deadlines and impact of the stay-at-home status is having an impact on the taxpayers getting the information to them, and then of course the actions that they take to produce the information, their outputs. And so I'm sensitive to again, and I'm sure that's part of the discussion that they want to have, and to really illustrate it with more detail. What does that impact look like at their level? And then to the degree, Ms. Cohen, that we can take away information from this discussion, then we can further go back and and then determine what else is there anything else we can do, and if yes, then what would that be? So that's a great segue to begin that conversation with which I believe the assessors and the assessors might be on this call with us. But great question, great foundation, good discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Fleming. Can we move on, Ms. Davis, to the next item?
Mr. Chairman, our next item is item N. In order to facilitate the number of speakers for the M item, we'll now need to call item N, public comments. We have one public comment that we have received. This public comment will be read by Mr. Henry Nanjo. Mr. Nanjo, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. So just for the record, this was a public comment that was received for the last meeting. Unfortunately, the commenter sent it to the wrong email address, so it never got to us. Discovered his error after the meeting and just asked that his comment be read into the record at this meeting. This is from Ken Sullivan, RPC Property Tax Advisors. Public comments on matters not on the agenda. His comments are actually questions. 1, can property taxpayers file a calamity claim due to economic calamity caused by the COVID-19 virus under Executive Order N33-20? And 2, can property taxpayers be exempted from late fees, penalties, and interest for property tax payments made after the April 10th, 2020 delinquency date? Please present these questions to the appropriate authorities. Thanks for your assistance in this matter. Respectfully, Ken. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
I'm sorry. Is that Ms. Cohen?
Yes, it's me.
Yes, go ahead.
This is a question to the chair, to Mr. Nanjo. Mr. Nanjo, I'm curious, how do we address the public comments? How do we get those answers to the commenter, the question that's raised by the public comment?
So on this particular matter, we have already addressed this with, we're going to be having property tax staff get back to the commenter and provide him his information and also give him some resources that he could follow up with. So this is being taken care of.
I'd like to know the answer to the question, so if you could have staff copy me or include me in the communication, because I think that's actually two very valid and serious questions that would be able to help me get more information out to my constituents. So I'm thankful for the question and would be even more grateful for the answer so that I could share it with other folks.
Absolutely. We'll have property tax copy you on the information we provide.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call the next item.
The next item is item N, public policy hearing. Chair Vasquez will lead a discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on the Property Tax Administration. Chair Vasquez, do you have the list of the speakers?
I do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Now you'll call the speakers once I give my opening remarks. Is that? I just want just a procedural thing.
We can definitely do that.
Perfect. Thank you. First, I would like to thank all the public who has joined us today, who are waiting on the line to give their presentations. I would also like to take this time to thank our Executive Director, Brenda Fleming, our Chief Counsel, Henry Nanjo, our BOE staff, who's worked very hard in making this meeting happen. I appreciate the heavy lift it was to move this meeting date up a week to allow us to have a timely discussion on the impacts of COVID-19 on Property Tax Administration. Thank you very much. Members, I will ask that we all keep our opening comments brief, allow us to get to the many public callers waiting on the line as quickly as possible. We as members will have an opportunity to fully discuss what we hear today and how we would like to move forward after the public testimony. I propose we wait to ask our questions after all the speakers have had the opportunity to speak. Can we all agree on that? If we're all comfortable with that, I want to thank all my colleagues on the board for their support in having this meeting today. And I appreciate all the hard work that each of us has done to prepare for today's discussion. I personally have spoken to many assessors from small, medium, and large counties up and down our state. The assessors in my district, LA, Ventura, San Bernardino, were very helpful, as well as OC Assessor Claude Parrish and San Diego Assessor Ernie Dronenberg, since they have a perspective from being former BOE board members too. In addition, I spoke with several taxpayer advocacy organizations, some who are here today. CSAC, and other county and city officials. This public policy meeting is unprecedented, and I am confident that with the input of many of you who have been able to structure this agenda time to maximize our time getting critical input from the public, as elected constitutional officers representing nearly 10 million constituents in our districts and working with the 58 assessors and many assessment appeal boards, we have a responsibility to ensure that during this COVID-19 state of emergency and recovery period that we make every effort to provide stability through fair, efficient, and uniform property tax administration for all taxpayers, businesses, and property owners and nonprofits. The public policy hearing to give everyone an opportunity to inform us of the COVID-19 impacts, problems, and issues that they see occurring. That really needs to be addressed in order to keep property tax administration stable and fair. We as board members need the information each of you have, and we intend to make sure that everyone has a chance to present it, both on the phone and in writing too, if you wish. From this meeting, we can develop a record of the issues, findings, and recommendations presented today. And colleagues, I would suggest that we make those findings available to the public and share them with the governor's office. We can discuss the specifics on how to do that after we hear all the public testimony. That segues into giving my colleagues and the public listening an update on the letter I sent to the governor. So that we're all on the same page, the intent of the letter to the governor sent at the end of March was requesting that governor grant the BOE temporary authority to extend statutory local and state property assessment filing deadlines beyond the extensions authorized by RTC 155 and GC 15620. I wrote the letter with the review and input from the BOE Executive Director and the CAA President, the Honorable Don Gakel. I appreciate that the collaborative efforts of Mr. Gakel and our ED were for the collective good. Good news to report is that the governor's office took our request under submission immediately, and we have continued to be in contact. Yesterday alone, with the Vice Chair's office, we met with the governor's staff to provide additional information. Thank you to Gary Gardner, Member Schaefer's Chief Deputy, for arranging the call. The phone meeting went well, and the governor's office recognizes the complexity of the property tax administration, and what was happy to hear, we are having this meeting today and would appreciate getting a summary of today's findings. I will continue to keep the board informed on the status, progress of the request to the governor. I am optimistically hopeful we will have a decision soon. In addition to my letter, we know that CAA also sent a letter on April 10th asking for the authority to waive penalties for late filing of the business personal property tax statements versus giving the BOE the expanded emergency authority to extend deadlines. While the CAA letter seems contradictory and a bit confusing since I had worked collectively with the CAA President Gakel in writing my letter, the one thing we have learned about COVID-19 is its fluidity and how quickly things change. I appreciate President Gakel's recent follow-up letter on April 20th that clarified the sequence of events that led to the CAA's letter to the governor. At the end of the day, we may not always agree on all matters, but I am committed, and I know Don is too, to make this a collaborative process as much as possible, and I look forward to the hearing from him and other assessors today. At the end of the day, the issue we're all facing are unprecedented. Never have millions of properties and businesses been shut down. We really, really need each other. I truly believe we can work together and carve out actions that will help people. It is in that spirit of unity and thoughtfulness for each other that we are opening this public policy hearing. Now I'd like to go down the line and give each of my colleagues an opportunity for brief remarks. I'll start with my Vice Chair, Mike Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair Vasquez, for bringing this topic to our agenda today. COVID-19 has impacted all of our lives in historic and profound ways. My thoughts and prayers are with all of those who have lost loved ones, those who are sick and scared, those who have lost jobs and are not really sure how they're going to feed their families in the coming weeks or the coming months. The BOE is committed to doing everything in our power to help Californians through this difficult time. I want to extend our profound thanks to Governor Gavin Newsom, who has navigated our great state. We are the fifth largest economy on earth through all of these crises, and with courage, intelligence, and compassion. I also want to thank the people of California who have done their part to flatten the curve and protect our health care and our essential workers, and to protect the most vulnerable to the virus. As a senior, I am particularly indebted to your willingness to shelter in space. COVID-19 has impacted businesses in ways that many don't realize. We will today, from the scheduled speakers, learn about many of the taxes that we're dealing with, and I want to highlight one specifically, which is the annual business property tax statement. The BTTS is a compilation of all business property, personal property such as machinery, equipment, furniture, leaseholds. By statute, we've got to file it with the county assessor by April 1st, but that was 3 weeks ago, and it's subject to a 10% penalty if it's late. I have a number of calls from business owners in District 4 who do not have the resources to complete their statements in a timely manner. It's a tedious problem to get information organized, collected, recorded, submitted, and analyzed and expressed. Staff at all of our workplaces are not available to collate all this information as timely as they used to be, and the CPAs don't have a staff when half your staff is closed down to work with businesses to prepare these. Given the economic downturn for many business owners, a 10% penalty adds insult to injury. One of our primary responsibilities is to administer property tax in a fair basis. Because of the business property statement is a statutory requirement, we are working with the governor's office to try to see if we can get some kind of immediate relief for these businesses. I'm looking forward to hearing and discussing creative solutions for businesses today, and thank you for the opportunity, Chair Vasquez.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Now we'll go down to Member Gaines.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just very concerned about what's happening in our country and in California in particular, and my thoughts and prayers go out to our leaders, to our BOE employees who are stepping up, to our first responders who are stepping up, to our nurses, to our doctors who are stepping up in such a big way and putting their lives at risk. And, Governor Newsom, I think, has been effective in bending the curve, and that is very encouraging, and I think it gives us hope for the future. I'm very concerned about the economy and what the state of the economy is turning into. And my fear is that it could be worse than a recession, and that we need to figure out how we can safely get people back to work. We've got a lot of people unemployed. I sit in this chair, very fortunate that I receive a paycheck from the state of California. But that is not so with a lot of fellow business owners that I know, and even family. My son was furloughed on March 21st. He is a used car buyer for a dealership, and they just shut the dealership down. I've got a son-in-law who is a contractor, and he's working on a project in Sonoma County. He was directed by the county that once the exterior of the building is watertight, that they have to stop construction. And so you look at this ripple effect occurring through our local economy, and we've got to figure out how we can reverse it and do it in a very timely way. I look at my position as a member of the BOE, and there are a few things that we can do that can provide some relief to folks. And so I think it's incumbent on this board for all of us to look for those ways. I know everybody is sympathetic, and I think we're all thinking along the same lines, but looking forward to the testimony in this meeting. I appreciate the suggestions in the letter that we got from the California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates. Some great suggestions. So I'm looking forward to hearing that testimony in this meeting and looking how.
Member Gaines.
Hello?
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 Hello, did we hear it?
Hello?
Did we lose Member Gaines? Hello?
We can hear you, Chairman.
I believe his line disconnected.
Oh, shoot. Let's go on. Ms. Cohen, are you prepared?
Yes, I'm prepared. I was actually touched by Member Gaines' remarks.
So was I.
On a personal note, I look and I watch across the entire country all the data, the hundreds of thousands of people that have been infected as well as those that have passed away. Personally, my uncle is in the hospital recovering from COVID-19 and is about 80 years old. He's doing well and will be able to make a full recovery. I'm just reminded at how devastating this virus has been, not only to the small community, but also acknowledging the ethnic communities, pockets within the African American community, Latino community, immigrant community that are suffering at a far greater loss and level than those of us who are probably on this call that are fortunate to have, one, a job, and two, to have health care and healthcare coverage, and to also to speak English and to understand all this information that is communicating back to us. So, good morning, colleagues. It is a gift to be here and a privilege to be able to speak with you during these very difficult times as we come together as Californians. In this particular moment, I'm reminded of something that Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff said recently. He explained that the roadmap of this crisis will unfold in three phases. First, responding to the pandemic. Second, recovery. And third, adapting to a new normal. And while we still believe that we're in the first phase, by our earlier conversation on this call, we are actively thinking and planning for the second phase by thoroughly developing our return to work strategy as well as looking ahead into the third. I wish to, again, add my voice to the commenders who have praised the governor. I also want to acknowledge our fellow constitutional officers, local mayors, city councils, board of supervisors, and assessors for leadership in responding to the pandemic, nonprofit workers as well. On March 16th, San Francisco Mayor Linda Breed issued the first stay-at-home order, and at the time, and in the days and the weeks following, most jurisdictions have followed her courageous lead. So it's with a lot of respect that I hereby acknowledge her vision and compassion. She offered a state of emergency before there was even one COVID case reported. In particular, I also want to acknowledge the staff of the State Board of Equalization, Brenda and her senior team. I want to also note service that they have given in the midst of a great adversity, helping to keep our $70 billion property tax system operating. The critical function that I believe at a moment of crisis will certainly be highlighted because it is the most stable source of revenue to local jurisdictions. And with that said, I want to acknowledge that we are in difficult times. The state, the country, the world, we are all interconnected. Many lives have been lost. I extend my heartfelt sympathies to all the families and the loved ones, particularly those that have lost loved ones. And I also applaud the amazing healthcare workers and those that are on the front line. Essential workers, thank you for responding. However, as I sit back at home, safe, I reflect. And as each day goes by, I remain hopeful and encouraged that we will collectively get through this crisis, because
we're resilient and strong. And that's, after all, we're Californians. And Chair Vasquez, I want to acknowledge and appreciate you for including this item on the board meeting agenda. I think it's important for us to listen and learn from those in our communities who've been impacted by the crisis, to hear their suggestions regarding property tax administration. I'll make some introductory comments and would like to call on some of the key decision makers and stakeholders a little bit later on in my remarks. And as a member of the Board of Equalization, I think it's our duty to ensure that the equal application of property tax rules and regulations certainly be universal. One thing that I want to highlight is under our constitutional and statutory authority, the board is charged with ensuring that the property tax assessment practices are equal and uniform throughout the entire state, within and among all 58 counties. And in normal times, we perform this duty in cooperation with our 58 assessors. We perform assessment practices surveys. We hold interested party meetings. We issue new or revised property tax rules, or, as we did last year, hold hearings on the modernization of the property tax administration. But, these are not normal times now. We're in a crisis. And it's our obligation to lead in the midst of this crisis. And as a result of COVID-19, the pandemic, the board members, we must work hard. We must meet regularly. We must share our ideas and listen so that we can lessen the burdens on homeowners as well as small businesses. And as we work to ensure this continuity in government functions, we must also ensure that our state's property tax payers and stakeholders have both uniform statewide application of property tax rules and regulations, and that appropriate notice of any changes of these regulations be made available to all. So it's my perspective that this public policy hearing is a fantastic opportunity to gain insight from taxpayers, from advocates, from our colleagues, as well as from staff. This is an opportunity to examine the impacts of COVID-19 on statewide property tax administration and the assessment appeals process, looking at the challenges facing taxpayers and stakeholders as they attempt to comply with the property tax laws and rules and the regulations. And based upon extensive discussions with property tax payers and stakeholders impacted by the pandemic, I have a couple points, 6 of them, that I'm raising today. The following issues are going to be for discussion. First is the immediate long-term need for the needs of state and local government agencies to meet the deadlines for property tax administration. I'd like to know what people are needing. I believe that our BOE staff is closely examining the upcoming deadlines to determine if any actions are required relating to deadlines to address the needs of our assessors, colleagues, or others. And I look forward to hearing input on the deadline issues. Second point, I'd like to get a status of request to the governor for additional authority for the Board of Equalization. We're all aware that this request has been made to the governor relating to additional powers. In particular, I am aware that there have been requests to extend the deadline for the filing of business property tax statements, which are due to be filed on May 7th. I look forward to the input and discussion on this particular issue. Third point, options for providing uniform guidance to homeowners and small property owners seeking a waiver of penalties and interest for delayed payments of property. Now, we're all aware, in anticipation of the April 10th deadline for the payment of the second installment of property taxes, the governor issued a press release on April 4th of 2020. The press release praised the pledge of the California counties to cancel penalties and other charges for homeowners and small businesses and their property owners that can demonstrate economic hardship. The governor referenced a joint statement issued by the California State Association of Counties, CSAC, and as well as the California Association of County Treasurers and Tax Collectors. Now, while this didn't guarantee a uniform application of the waiver and the relief of the penalties in all 58 counties, it did provide a standard to follow. So I suggest that the governor's press release and the joint statement from CSAC and the Tax Collectors Association be placed on the Board of Equalization's website. along with other resources such as the links of the Secretary of State's business programs, the link of the governor's website, and the Employment Development Department's link for payroll, taxes, and FTB and CDTFA links. I think these are all imperative links of information that we could be directing our constituents to go to the BOE website so that they can get further information and connectivity to other statewide entities. The fourth point that I'd like to bring up and highlight is options for assessors and clerks of assessment appeals boards to postpone official acts. Now, I don't know if there's an appetite for this, but I'd like to have a discussion on it. This refers to a very, very real-world issues of how to address the assessment appeals administration in this new COVID-19 world. So, in particular, I'm interested in hearing the views of those concerned with the assessment appeals in a few areas, like to your deadline to render assessment appeals decision, the time required to notify parties of pending hearing dates, particularly difficulties during the stay-at-home environment when it's hard to reach parties, issues related to the document filing and examination at remotely held teleconference hearings. One more, the 45-day notice requirement of hearings. So the bottom line is whether or not any additional authority is required to ensure that the administrative efficiency for assessment appeals. And my last 2 points are pretty simple. First, the fifth one is during this item, I look forward to a report from the Executive Director and the Deputy Director of Property Tax on plans and recommendations to address property tax administration in the face of the pandemic. You heard me talk a little bit about it earlier in the Executive Director report. I'm interested in hearing what are the options, what are the best practices for ensuring that the uniformity of administrative practices and the continuity continue to happen. In particular, I'm interested in whether uniform guidance to assessors is required on these procedures. Related to business property tax statements via email. This issue also relates to the business property tax statements which have been signed and executed. And looking beyond this meeting, I suggest, as part of my property tax modernization initiative, that the board examine possible administrative or legislative changes which would allow all assessors' documents to be received electronically, including the possible revisions of the current statutory requirements for the acceptance of electronic signatures by government agencies. And finally, I look forward to the discussion and possible action regarding the board support for legislative remedies to address challenges to uniform property tax administration resulted from COVID-19. So regarding all of these issues, I believe the BOE may consider whether we may offer our support or for legislation or to codify the relief of penalties. I suggest we support in concept legislation which is consistent with the governor's statement issued on April 4th and the joint statement issued by CPAC and the County Treasurers Association. And Mr. Chair, at this time, I just want to thank again our hardworking staff who continue to serve taxpayers during this terrible pandemic. And I also would like to thank each presenter that's been patiently waiting, particularly highlighting those that I personally have invited to present on these important and timely issues that I've highlighted above. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have Member Gaines back on the line. Is that true?
Yes, I'm back on the line. I don't know what happened there. Sorry.
Did you want to finish your comments?
Yeah, if I could just, I'll keep it really brief, and that is that, again, I just want to reiterate opportunities for us to help taxpayers and assessors. Is there a way that we can work in providing pathways for simplicity for people who, let's say, have a business that's shut down? How will they have the ability to move forward and even get a report specifically, as mentioned by Kata and reiterated by Member Cohen, on this wet signature authorization? I think that's an area that we can zero in on, that we could provide some quick relief for folks that are having turn in the business personal property returns. And on that note, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Deputy Controller Stowers. Do you have any comments?
Good morning, everyone. I'll be brief. On behalf of Controller Yee, I would like to thank BOE staff and Ms. Fleming for their continued commitment to moving BOE forward during this trying time. We also like to thank first responders, healthcare workers, those who are working in the homeless shelters and bringing people off the street. They're also on the first line. And for so many people, especially in my community, who are taking care of family members during this very trying time. As far as today's meeting, I look forward to hearing from stakeholders and the general public on the impact of COVID-19 and property tax administration. And then I kind of would like to loop back to Ms. Cohen's comment about, and I tried to catch it all, Ms. Cohen, so I may not quite understand, but I believe you talked about uniform guidance and penalties as it relates to payment of property taxes and the governor's statement and the joint statement by CSAC and the tax collectors. But I think you were feeling that we still didn't have enough uniform guidance. So I just wanted to, at least for those who are on this call, let people know that there was a sample form prepared in connection with raising penalties for that second installment. This form is done in collaboration with the State Controller's Office as we work in partnership with the State County Collectors and in association, the County Association of County Treasurer Tax Collectors. That form is on the State Controller's website under sample forms and figures, very similar to how BOE does their sample forms for the assessors. I have also forwarded the link of that form over to Ms. Fleming, and she will share with you guys if you would like to have a copy of it. Other than that, thank you all, and I'm looking forward to having or hearing some comments from the public.
Thank you. Thank you, members, Deputy Controller, for your comments. And actually, my prayers, I didn't realize that we had one of the members, Ms. Cohen, a family member, who actually contacted. That's the first I've heard from my circle of folks. You know, we hear so much on the news of all these people, one, being contacted with it, and then those that have actually passed on. But it sounds like he's on the road to recovery, so my prayers are with your family, Ms. Cohen. With that, let me just move into, before we begin with the speakers we have lined up, I just wanted to go over some real quick protocols and to ensure the full engagement of all that are on the queue waiting to speak. First, for the members of the public, please state your name, organization if applicable, and if you have submitted a document in writing so that the Chief of Board Proceedings can make it available to everyone during or after the meeting. For the speakers, if possible, please identify the type of impact you intend to address. Some examples are listed in the A through H on the agenda. This will help those who are taking minutes and those taking notes to track and summarize the public discussion. The orders of the speakers, we're just actually going by the order that the individual organizations had signed up. So we will go down as they came into, as they recorded and requested to speak. And the Q&A, after all the speakers have shown, or at least after all the speakers that are shown on the agenda have presented, I will ask each board member for comments and questions regarding the presentations. I ask that the board members hold their questions to after we have heard from all the public speakers. Thank you. Can the clerk please call the first speaker?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The first speaker is the Honorable Don Gakel, President, California Assessors Association and Stanislaus County Assessor. Mr. Gakel?
Excuse me. One correction, though, Ms. Davis. I was wondering if we could put the Honorable Carmen Chu, because I know she's needs to leave.
Okay.
I apologize for that, and then we could just reverse and go back to the order.
Okay. No problem. Mr. Gakel, if you can hold just one moment. We will now call the Honorable Carmen Chu, San Francisco City and Counter Assessor Recorder. Ms. Chu?
Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Chair Vasquez, for the time request. However, because Assessor Gakel is the president of the CAA, actually, I would defer to him to start first, and perhaps I can follow him. Would that be okay with you?
It's good with me. I was just trying to respect your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, we'll go back to the order.
Mr. Gakel?
Okay. Good morning, Chair Vasquez, members of the board, other participants, and public listening in. This is Don Gakel, Stanislaus County Assessor and President of the CAA. And I'm just sitting there thinking impacts of COVID-19, although we're talking weeks, it seems like almost a year ago that I actually attended the February meeting of the board in Sacramento. So many things have happened, beginning with the Bay Area counties doing stay-at-home orders on March 12th, and that weekend the schools announcing that they were shutting down pretty much statewide, and assessors' offices closing, and the governor issuing his statewide order on the 19th. So it all happened very quickly. Local government financial systems, including the property tax system and assessors, were generally determined to be essential services as a backbone of the local discretionary revenue system. And for the most part, the latter part of March and April, assessors were spending time putting employees out to work at home, as most businesses that were continuing were doing. That varied, I think, from county to county, depending on the size of the county. Larger counties getting a big end of their workforce home to limit the number of people in the office, to smaller counties that may be still working in their offices due to lower staff numbers. So there have been varying impacts across the state. And during that time, of course, we'd have to restraining our IT infrastructures and having to deal with emergency personnel issues and emergency leaves. So it's been a very challenging time for assessors. And keep in mind that much of the work that assessors doing is now processing change in ownership events and new construction events that occurred in the 2019 calendar year. And so we are still processing those. I'm sure that counties entered the COVID-19 crisis in different places in that process, some in better position than others. But generally, this time of year, assessors are busy working on their assessment role. We've kind of put meetings and other things aside for the most part, but that has not been the case this year. Your agenda today is focused in large part on deadlines. Assessment deadlines, local roll deadlines, and exemption filing deadlines are part of that. And although assessors are not revenue agents, we're very much cognizant of the fact that we are the foundation of local property tax system that delivers funds for schools and is the largest single share in most counties of discretionary revenue. And those revenues are critical now as local government attempts to meet the services and needs of those in the community. So with that in mind, deadlines are critical to the timely completion of the local assessment role. The value is established as of the lien date, and the roll delivery to the auditors on July 1st establishes the timelines around which tax rates, tax bills, and tax due dates are established. So with that in mind, thinking of how the property tax system works, the challenges completing the role and adapting to work at home, many assessors have asked for extensions, as you noted earlier in the meeting, by accepting the extensions requested by various counties. I think most assessors, myself included, would hope that we do not need those extensions due to the downstream impacts of requesting such extensions. A 30-day extension or a 40-day extension on the assessment roll has downstream impacts on the auditor, on the tax collector, and then on all the agencies that depend on that revenue stream. So I know that assessors have requested extensions as a good business practice in case they need them. I know that we're all working as hard as we can to meet those deadlines. I noticed that one of the things also mentioned on the thing, exemption filing deadlines, and the good news there is that for most annual exemption filings, the deadline to file in California was February 15th, before most of the impacts of COVID-19 stay-at-home orders were in effect. And homeowners can file exemptions through 5 p.m. on December 10th of this year and still get 80% of their exemption. Welfare and institutional filers will actually have longer than that, but again would not get 100% exemption. But fortunately, those deadlines hit before the COVID-19 impact. What has concerned assessors in large part is the information that we are still gathering, which has been discussed here today, the May 7th business property statement filing deadlines. And as you've already noted, the BOE has limited authority under Section 155. And as you also noted, Chair Vasquez, and in response to inquiries to BOE staff and from assessors around the state, inquired of the governor to have the authority to extend filing dates or take other actions to provide relief. Assessors, of course, as you also noted, specifically asked to have authority to waive penalties as required to assist taxpayers in COVID-19, and driven in large part because the Revenue Taxation Code does not give assessors any leeway on imposition of penalties if statements are not filed by the May 7th deadline. Assessors don't really want to be in that position, and therefore ask for the authority to be able to waive penalties as needed for the time between May 7th and May 31st. The dialogue is continuing, as you noted, with your office and the governor, and with our advocate in Capitol also continuing. And we look forward to working together to find solutions for that. It's worth noting current filing status in counties generally that I have talked to, and in our county, is running fairly consistently with filings from last year. And we will not probably know the impact for the next few weeks. In our county, 2/3 generally of the statements come in between now and May 7th, and or at least the ones that are timely filed. And many of those are submitted by CPA's offices, and it's hard to say what the impact will be on that. The income tax deadlines were pushed out, but again, we have no idea what impact that will have on filing. Suffice to say, we do continue to look for a solution and look forward to working with all parties involved to find a solution to that. You do mention in your meeting notes decline in value, disaster relief. Again, deadlines being critical to the assessor's business. All property assessed on the local roll is assessed in value as of the January 1st lien date. And that's true whether it's changes in ownership, new construction that have happened by the lien date and during the 2019 year. It's true also of business property assets owned, controlled, or in use as of the January 1st lien date. And those are the business property statements that we are waiting to have filed now. In addition to that, you also discuss on your agenda Proposition 8, decline in value provisions in the Constitution to address declines happening in most years. Assessors generally are anticipating that we will be looking at many declines in value in the coming year as the market resets and the data and information becomes clear on the status of the market. There is, most assessors believe, would be very little sales information available currently or impacting the 90-day statutory window that assessors would be looking at to consider market values as of the January 1st lien date 2020. That information will become available and well known as the year progresses and going towards the January 1st, 2021 lien date. We anticipate that there would be significant corrections at that time. I did note that in their presentation, the CATA presenters would be addressing perhaps a disaster relief. I had spoken with Paul Waldman and Chris O'Neill, speakers who will be coming about that earlier this year. They were kind enough to call me and talk about those issues. As I told them at the time, and I still feel that the economic fallout is still coming, and the market impact is not known. We're appraisers as assessors, and we work on data, and we're looking at sales and data to justify our decisions. As the year goes on, that data will become very apparent. Currently, the federal government and the state government are providing financial relief to businesses, as they should, and we hope that helps those businesses through a difficult time. And we are certainly not insensitive to the issues of taxpayers, but from an assessment point of view, we think that may be a difficult issue to address through assessment, given the statutory guidelines that assessors work under. And that is really, those are the issues I was prepared to address. I know that there are issues involving assessment appeals and the waiving of tolling dates that are critical and of concern to stakeholders, to CSAC and the County Clerks Association. But I know that also John McKibben is on your list of speakers and would be addressing that later. So I will leave that up to him. And with that, with the intent of working together to solve assessment issues ahead, I will conclude my comments and let you move on to the next speaker.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead with the Honorable Carmen Chu.
Thank you so much, Chair Vasquez, to Vice Chair Schaefer, Member Cohen, Member Gaines, and Ms. Stowers. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak with you, and thank you for holding this unprecedented hearing. I think COVID-19 is certainly top of mind for so many people at the moment. I think I share many of the comments that you've expressed in terms of my appreciation for frontline workers and for healthcare workers and even folks who are working at our grocery stores and pharmacies and delivery services who are keeping things moving. They do that with risk, and I certainly know that with my own husband being a firefighter. So just understanding and knowing that every day folks are out there continuing to provide services, even at their own risk. So I appreciate them very much. I think as many of you have mentioned, this is definitely a time that is unprecedented. We're seeing a lot of hard times, not only for individuals, but also for businesses. The $350 billion of federal PPP money was gone in 1 week. So I think that gives us all a scale of how pervasive and how immediate some of these economic issues have been. And I know, Chair Vasquez, you and I have spoke about some of your concerns around the fairness even of how PPP monies were allocated and some of the vulnerable populations and communities that may not be able to benefit from some of those programs. And so I think we all come to this meeting today with a desire to be responsive and understanding of the hard time that all of our constituents are going through, but also aware of the important functions that we all carry on as assessors across the state in terms of our underlying support of city and local services. And so I think this is something that we all understand. Just to give a picture, I think Chair Cohen asked me to give a overview of what we're seeing here in terms of impact locally. In San Francisco County, we are expecting to see a budget deficit in terms of our own city's operating budget of something around the range of $1.1 to $1.7 billion over a 2-year period of time. This is significant. To just give you a comparison, when we were in the throes of the Great Recession, we were probably at a 2-year budget deficit of something more around the range of $800 million. And so just the scale of that in comparison to say that we're looking down the barrel of $1.1 to $1.7 billion in operating shortfall is really significant. In March alone, we had over 70 businesses here give notice of layoffs to come, noticing for about 6,000 layoffs, and that was just in the month of March. We don't have numbers yet for April, but you can imagine that will continue to rise. Our hospitality industry, which is a cornerstone of our economy here in San Francisco, and also has many impacts to related industries like our entertainment industries, our restaurants, our catering services, all the services that benefit from hospitality have been hurt very badly. Occupancy is down. Some hotels, as you know, are closed momentarily, and then our numbers for hotel tax revenues are down about $100 to $120 million this year alone. So that's pretty significant for our operations. For our own assessor's office operations, shelter-in-place was ordered March 16th for us in the Bay Area, and we began operating remotely by March 17th. So the next day, we were able to turn that on very quickly. Currently, about 98% of our operating hours are done remotely. We still need to come into the office to provide some functionality in order to make sure that our processes work. I think, again, we just understand that we are a foundation for the city, so we must continue to do our work. And I think though there have been many challenges to collaboration, there's less efficiency because people don't have the same tools and equipment at home. There's childcare issues to contend with. I think overall, I really want to appreciate my staff for the hard work that they are doing to make sure that we continue the work that we're doing there. That being said, I think what I'm understanding in terms of the intent of this hearing is really to understand what it is that the Board of Equalization can be doing in order to be supportive of not only local efforts, but also to help in general the people of California to recover and to get through this difficult time. And so I think that there are two perspectives. I'm going to speak a little bit about the property tax side of some of the things that we are looking at that could be helpful, but I think also as a message, you are all public officials and have a responsibility and a role to play to be able to partner with us, meaning that one of the things that we're seeing, I serve on the Economic Recovery Task Force for San Francisco. We're thinking about things that we need to do to put in place a strong recovery for San Francisco quickly and as expediently as possible. But the magnitude of the problem that we're looking at is so significant that it is impossible to imagine us being able to move the needle without the help of the state government as well as the federal government. And as our representatives at the BOE, I think you have a much closer pulse to the politics of the state, to what is happening, what is being considered, revenues or measures or resources that the state is considering. And I think to the extent that you have the capacity to be a partner with us to advocate for the resources that we need and to share information, I think that would be extremely valuable to all of us locally at the county level. We simply don't always have the ability to have an eye on what's happening at the state because of our local responses, and your partnership there, I think, could be very helpful. A second thing, in terms of just generally as public officials, and I speak to you as a member of the Asian American community, is that, frankly, many Asian Americans are being targeted and attacked as a result of COVID-19. I think it doesn't help that we've had this virus be called the Chinese virus, and so the impact of that is that we have many microaggressions and straight aggression that is happening to the Asian American community, bullying that is happening in schools, seniors who are being attacked on the street, and to the extent that we have a coalition of supporters in terms of our public officials across different ethnicity groups and who are denouncing those kinds of actions, I think that would be incredibly meaningful to the Asian American community and also would be much more impactful in terms of making sure that we're helping. So that is just to broadly say what you could be doing to be helping during this time as public officials. Now, as members of the Board of Equalization, there are very specific things that we are looking at that could also be helpful for us. And keep in mind that these comments that I'm making are comments as a mostly urban county and also a county that is relatively dense. I think you're going to want to also be reaching out to the small and rural counties as well. I know that Larry Stone is speaking later, as well as Jeff Prang, who covers larger counties and more urban counties, but we definitely want to make sure that we don't forget the impacts operationally that COVID-19 is having on our small and rural counties, because they have a very different operating structure and they feel this in a very different way. A few things for us at the state level. I think that the assessment appeals deadlines are very important. As you know, we have a 2-year statute of limitation in order to hear all hearings. And if that does not happen, there are consequences in terms of evaluation that would have to be put on the roll. And so to the extent that you could be helpful in taking a look at how we might be able to extend those deadlines, I think that would be something that is immediate that you could be doing. Right now in San Francisco, we have the capacity to do remote meetings, but we have not yet held an Assessment Appeals Board meeting. We're working very closely with our Assessment Appeals Board and with our clerk to just make sure that we're aware of the schedule so that we're not missing any that might be hitting a 2-year statute of limitation period. But as you can imagine, if COVID-19 continues for a longer duration of time or comes and goes or might have relapses, we're going to have to consider what kind of flexibilities legally we might actually be needing in order to continue to have fair hearings of these cases and not sort of risk the ability to do that. So I think that's one thing that I would ask the Board of Equalization to look into is what we can be doing on assessment appeals deadline, understanding that COVID-19 might be with us for a while and how it is that we're going to deal with it, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. In terms of nonprofit exemptions, we have asked the governor to take a look at making sure that annual renewals can still stay in place, even if we're not able to process all applications right away. I think, as you know, our nonprofit partners are an important partner in the delivery of service for us locally in San Francisco and I'm sure across the state. And so we're watchful for that and want to make sure that there are no unintended consequences to our nonprofit partner. In terms of the flow of information coming to our office is both an assessor's office as well as a recorder's office. So in terms of deeds that come through that start the process for an assessment or evaluation, we have actually seen a few challenges here. For example, we are able as an office to continue receiving electronic recording, but electronic recording services are not open to all members of the public. People can still mail in those documents like deeds or other things, but sometimes they need a notary in order to make sure that the document is legitimate and not fraudulent. And we are seeing that we have fewer and fewer services available for notaries, and I know that the state had considered in the past whether or not they would consider electronic notaries to be available. This is currently being done in other states. We don't have that authority in California yet, and so that is something that I would encourage the State Board of Equalization, perhaps just in their partnership with others, to be able to look into, because it does impact the flow of information that comes into our office and our ability to handle transactions as a whole. On the CADA items that have been put forward, there are a number of things that are here. I think, frankly, some of the information or suggestions need to be fleshed out because there's not a lot of detail behind it, so hard to respond to. But the one thing that I would say is that in terms of wet signatures, Ted Gaines, Member Gaines, had mentioned that this idea of supporting the ability to have taxpayers submit information through different mechanisms. We certainly agree with that because I think even if we did not have a COVID-19 scenario, I think more and more taxpayers are looking for different ways to improve the ease in which they provide information to us. So I think taking a look at that is reasonable, and not only is it reasonable, I think it could be a benefit to taxpayers in the long term as well. We just need to make sure that we're not opening up any opportunity for fraudulent behavior to happen. But if we're doing it thoughtfully, I think that is a possibility for us to pursue. With that, I think I'm just going to conclude my comment to just thank the board members for your attention. And although I have to be signing off soon, I'm available at any time for you to call upon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, the clerk, if you would just go to follow the order now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next speaker is the Honorable John McKibben, California Association of Clerks and Elected Officials and Clerk of the Board, Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. Mr. McKibben, are you available?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. My name is John McKibben. I'm actually a Deputy Clerk of the Board in Los Angeles County, and I'm speaking today on behalf of that office and on behalf of the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials. Our members are Clerk of the Board members of the CACEO, are administrators of the assessment appeals programs in California's counties. We really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you today about the effects of COVID-19 on assessment appeals process, because have a lot of concerns, as you can imagine. We hope your board will be able to assist clerks in addressing the changes in the process that will have to be made in order to cope with this crisis, and in order also to continue providing taxpayers and assessors with due process in the appeal process while still making the process manageable for clerks and county boards. That's going to be a bit of a challenge. First, a little background of some things to keep in mind. As I've mentioned before your board, this is a program that's under the Constitution belongs to the Board of Supervisors, and I'm hoping that today somebody from CSAC will be here to talk about CSAC's concerns and efforts as well. Large counties typically have a significant number of pending appeals, as you might imagine. And unlike in a normal year, right now the number of pending appeals is not going down anywhere in California due to the fact that assessment appeals boards have been closed down since the middle of last month due to COVID-19. Clearly, they're going to remain closed for some time to come. Processing and scheduling of appeals has ceased and hearings have been canceled. We anticipate that county boards will continue to be closed for an as yet undetermined amount of time. With regard to the COVID-19's potential effects on future workload trends, historically, economic factors prompt large spikes in assessment appeal rates, such as in the 1990s and during the Great Recession earlier in this century. COVID-19 will soon begin to affect the real estate market, and if it hasn't already, closed businesses and outright business failures are going to greatly aggravate the market's condition. Most affected properties are going to be commercial industrial in nature, the large value, complex properties that require lengthy hearings. So the result, in broad terms, is going to be a large spike in the rate of appeal or the number of assessment appeals filed, especially among commercial industrial properties. There's going to be a spillover effect on residential real estate market, triggering even more appeals. Potentially, we anticipate an overwhelming number of appeals around California beginning this year and at least through 2021. How that will play out and when that will play out may depend on some of the actions of the board and or the governor on what changes are going to be made to cope with all of this. As indicated in testimony and comments by the members today, we may see claims of misfortune and calamity due to effects of COVID-19 on commercial properties, which is going to result in additional appeals to the county boards, which may then in turn result in even more appeals absent an extraordinary effort by assessors. All this is going to require a tremendous increases in spending at the county level for costs associated with acquiring and supporting the staff and the facilities, the hearing rooms, and additional qualified assessment appeals board members and hearing officers needed to cope with the skyrocketing rate of appeal. And all this is at a time of radically declining tax revenue due to the effects of COVID-19, as referred to by Assessor Chu. There are other aspects of impacts on assessment appeals boards and clerks, and these include that under the current appeal hearing process, social distancing is going to reduce the number of people who can safely gather in the appeals board's hearing rooms and facilities. The number of hearings on a daily calendar will often have to be reduced. Smaller hearing agendas means losing hearing capacity, thus reducing the assessment appeals board's effectiveness and efficiency. Hearing officer hearings will be similarly affected, and many more assessment appeals boards will need to be created to maintain the pace of dispositions due to the reduced calendars in both boards and hearing officer sites. At least 3 counties are already at the legal maximum of 5 boards permitted by Revenue and Taxation Code Section 1621 and cannot increase the number of assessment appeals boards beyond that 5. Something else serious to consider, most assessment appeals board members and hearing officers are members of the COVID-19 virus's target demographic, that is, people who are 60 years and older. COVID-19 will therefore aggravate an already dangerous shortage, at least dangerous in our view in Los Angeles, of qualified board members and hearing officers who are willing to serve on a board. All of this is going to cause county boards and clerks very serious challenges, as you might imagine, in meeting the deadline for rendering a decision on every appeal within 2 years of filing under the RMT Code Section 1604. And keep in mind that failure to timely hear and dispose of hearings or of appeals will result in the applicant's opinion of value being enrolled for the year or years covered by the taxpayer's application form. I'm aware that some might consider that a day brightener, but consider the following. It's already clear that COVID-19 will certainly cause the state to lose large amounts of tax revenue from its 3 greatest revenue sources, that is personal income tax, corporate income tax, and sales tax. But the remaining major source, the property tax, is also going to suffer reductions through declining assessed values, but it can also suffer declines through the likely defaults on the 2-year deadline, which will result in even greater revenue losses. And the state's revenue loss will be aggravated due to loss of property tax funding for schools, which must be backfilled by the state. So what steps do we think can be taken to mitigate these impacts? We need, first and foremost, relief with regard to the 2-year deadline contained in Section 1604. We need relief with regard to the 45-day notice of hearing requirement, Section 1605.6, under certain circumstances, as mentioned by Member Cohen, especially after hearing postponement that has been granted to one or both of the parties, which we're required to grant as a matter of right. We'll need relief with regard to certain other time frames in the code and in the property tax rules. Now, these 3 issues were brought to the attention through CSAC by our organization. They were submitted to the governor's for the governor's office's consideration as emergency or executive orders, but so far they've not been accepted. And we understand that the governor's office has indicated that they prefer that the Board of Equalization grant such relief. If that is the case, immediate clarification by your board as to whether it can grant appropriate relief under Section 155 or some other provision of law is necessary. I emphasize the word appropriate because Section 155 seems only to permit an extension of, say, the 2-year deadline by 40 days. 40 days hardly rises to the level of a Band-Aid on this situation. The notice of hearing requires at least 45 days lead time, so 40 days in that entire 2-year process is not significant. Now, we understand that some members of the staff may have interpreted Section 155 to mean only a one-time extension of 40 days, but this is wholly inadequate to address the extensions of potentially thousands of assessment appeals. Come Monday, for example, we will have already lost 40 days of hearing, and there's no end in sight at this point. If your board believes that it does not have the ability to grant the appropriate relief we need, which is an indefinite tolling of the 2-year deadline, then we strongly urge your board, along with assessors and clerks and CSAC, to once again approach the governor to either directly grant the requested relief or grant your board the necessary authority to do so. We also need legislation to eliminate the cap on the number of assessment appeals boards that a county board of supervisors may create, currently limited to 5. This will be of vital importance in dealing with the economic and assessment appeal fallout of COVID-19. Now, CACEO and Los Angeles County are jointly sponsoring Assembly Bill 3373, authored by the Committee on Revenue and Taxation, to do just that. We strongly urge the board's active support in getting this bill enacted. One further issue of importance to clerk, which has come up already several comments today, and that is to do with remote hearings. This possible direction raises some very serious challenges to clerks as administrators of the appeals program, and indeed to assessors and taxpayers as well, in the context of these hearings, which are quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings, given the current law in the Revenue and Taxation Code and the property tax rules. For example, your board's rules properly require that the county boards base their decisions solely upon evidence taken at the hearing. How this will be accomplished at a remote hearing, we need some guidance on. Could the board members and opposing parties properly examine witnesses and conduct cross-examination if the parties cannot be seen? How would evidence be submitted to the board and by whom? How would evidence be given to the opposing party and by whom? If implementation would require access to certain technological equipment, would the appeal process discriminate against parties who lack that technology, whether it be taxpayers or even some assessors? How would county boards of equalization pay for the technology that might be needed, might need to be acquired in order to implement appropriate and effective remote hearings? And there are a number of other questions which we will need to work out. So if remote hearings are under consideration by your board, we urgently request that you immediately initiate a conversation with clerks about how this might be done and where the resources, and perhaps even where the resources to do that might come from. Thank you for providing clerks with this opportunity to participate in today's discussion. We look forward to hearing the rest of the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, if you go down the list.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The next speaker is Paul Waldman of CADA. He is the president and director.
Good morning, members of the board.
Welcome.
Am I on?
Yes.
So good morning, members of the board. I want to thank the board members and staff for this meeting and for inviting CADA to speak today. I'm Paul Waldman. I'm president of the California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates, or CADA. For those who don't know who we are an organization who represents state and local taxpayers before county assessors, the Franchise Tax Board, and the Board of Equalization. Our purpose is in advancing the professional practice of state and local tax consulting for education, advocacy, and high ethical standards. Before I start, Member Cohen, I just want to say I certainly hope for a speedy recovery of your uncle. That's very scary. And it certainly brings it a little bit closer to home to everyone, doesn't it? So getting back to my comments, so as you can imagine, our members, and even more so our clients, have been severely impacted by COVID-19. I can tell you from my personal experience, my clients have been spending much of their time dealing with their tenants, many of them small businesses, to figure out how their tenants are going to survive as well as how they're going to survive. CADA has been working very hard to look for options to mitigate the economic damage to our clients as well as the impact of issues surrounding the appeal process in California. To that end, we have 3 speakers today who will address the issues, which we have broken up into 3 sections. We have short-term issues, or the most immediate items we feel need to be addressed, the medium-term issues surrounding the 2020 assessments and what can be done to help taxpayers now, and long-term issues as we move forward through this year and next. Our first speaker will be Nick Fogel. He's the CADA treasurer, and he will be discussing short-term issues surrounding the filing of business personal property returns, talking about the issues we see, as well as issues we see with filing assessment appeal applications for 2020 and some potential solutions for this. Our next speaker will be Chris O'Neill, chair of the CADA board, who will be discussing the medium-term issues. Chris will be talking about various options that CADA feels may be considered to offer taxpayers immediate relief for 2020. It doesn't need to be said here that small businesses are in dire need of help, and that, of course, affects the entire commercial real estate food chain. Our final speaker will be Wes Nichols. He's a CADA board member. He'll be discussing the long-term issues with respect to mitigating the impact of a massive spike in appeal filings in California in 2020, 2021, and beyond. And so with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Nick Fogel, who will start with the short-term issues. Nick, are you on?
I am. Good morning. I'd like to thank everyone for allowing us to participate in this discussion today. These are obviously challenging times, and we greatly appreciate the opportunity to offer up a few ideas we think will help California businesses navigate matters during this crisis. I'll be covering proposed action items around short-term issues for 2020 related to filing business personal property returns and filing assessment appeal applications. We believe the short-term actions that we are proposing will help alleviate pressures on California businesses and will not have any meaningful cost to implement. For each item, I'll present some background for clarity, identify challenges, and offer solutions. The solutions are straightforward, involve a small bit of extra time where needed, and taking advantage of existing technology to be mindful of personal safety and allow for adherence to social distancing guidelines. Item 1, we've had a few people touch on this earlier today, the filing of business personal property returns and renditions. As you know, every year, taxpayers must file business personal property returns with county assessors. These returns, sometimes called renditions, list all of the personal property taxpayers had in a county as of January 1 in a given year. Returns have to be filed by May 7th to avoid an automatic late filing penalty. We see a huge range in the backup documentation and compiling of data required, from several documents to 20 rows totaling 100,000 to hundreds of documents, 50,000 plus rows of data totaling well into $1 billion. The specific challenges that are facing taxpayers vary depending on the size and sophistication, but generally speaking, we see taxpayers facing 2 problems that we'd like to address. First, stay-at-home orders and COVID are preventing taxpayers and their employees from gathering and assembling the necessary information needed to prepare and timely file their 571L. Second, some jurisdictions are continuing to require forms to be filed with original wet signatures from authorized persons. Wet signatures on documents corresponding to penalties for late filings require traditional mailing protocols that are no longer safe or practical. Our suggestions for addressing the first problem: move the 2020 compliance filing deadline from May 7th to June 15th, and allow county assessors to postpone the roll close date to business personal property accordingly. As an alternative to extending the deadline, we could offer to waive late filing penalties for returns filed by July 15th. Suggestions for addressing the second problem: we would like to propose allowing the filing of Form 571Ls with an electronic signature and submission by fast mail or scan. The second item I'm going to address today is filing assessment appeal applications. County assessors mail supplemental and escape assessment notices and tax bills taxpayers at their business addresses at somewhat unpredictable times within a 4-year window. Supplemental and estate assessment notices must be appealed within 60 days of the date of mailing by assessors. Due to COVID and stay-at-home orders, some property owners are not able to timely retrieve mail sent to their business addresses. As a result, business owners may miss the date for appealing supplemental and escape assessments. Additionally, some jurisdictions continue to require wet signatures on assessment appeal applications and corrections. Again, wet signatures and adherence to a traditional mail process are not necessarily safe or practical at this time. Our suggestions for addressing these problems: first, where taxpayers are unable to timely file assessment appeal applications due to COVID-19 stay-at-home orders, permit taxpayers to file applications with an explanation for the delayed filing attached to the application form. Second, again, we'd like to allow taxpayers to submit assessment appeal applications and related documents with an electronic signature by fax mail or scan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Our next speaker here at CADA will be Chris O'Neill, who will be talking about the medium-term issues that we see. Chris, are you on?
I'm here. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Chairman Vasquez and members of the board for taking the time to listen to what we're hopeful are ideas that will deal with a number of the issues that have arisen as a result of the pandemic. I also want to thank our assessor colleagues on the other side of the aisle, because I think that we have developed a working relationship with the CAA and Chairman Gakel, and I appreciate his comments and certainly look forward to working with the assessors and with the board and hopefully resolving some of the issues we face because of COVID-19. I want to address this morning what I call medium-term issues, and those are really tied to allowing taxpayers to obtain property tax relief this year. And to understand that, it's important to know the background of how property tax generally works in California. For the current, for this year, 2020 through 2021, that fiscal year, the date of value is going to be January 1, 2020. And assessment appeals can be filed starting in July. But those assessment appeals, some of which won't be heard until next year sometime, will be based on what market conditions were as of January 1st of this year. And with few exceptions, no one in California, no businesses, no property owners had any idea of how things would look as of today and how they may look as of July 1st. With the stay-at-home orders, businesses have closed, all types of businesses are shuttered, revenues are down, rents are not being paid, mortgages are in jeopardy. And this just isn't, the large property owners. This is a lot of small property owners, the strip shops and the beauty salons and all those kinds of places that we typically see. I drive down a main thoroughfare in my community, and everything is closed, small and large stores of all types. Because of the fact that if taxpayers wanted relief now and they filed an appeal during the regular filing season, they would be stuck with how the market looked on January 1st of this year, which means that filing a regular assessment appeal this year won't be effective. You would have to file an assessment appeal next year in July of 2021, and that would look to what the market was like on January 1st, 2021. In the meantime, we'll have had 8, 10, 12 months of downturn in the real estate market, and a lot of companies will just go out of business. Small property owners are not going to be receiving rents. They're going to go out of business. We're going to lose a lot of property owners or have a lot of vacant properties. So the question becomes, what can we do now? What are some ideas about what we could do now, today, in the next 40 days? to help these property owners whose properties are shuttered, who aren't going to be receiving income, whose values are way down, and in some cases who may not even be able to afford their property taxes going forward. And there are three ideas that I want to put forth that would provide some form of immediate relief. The first is something that's been talked about briefly already, and that's a misfortune and calamity claim that would be filed under Section 170 of the Revenue and Taxation Code. These are sometimes frequently filed when we have a major fire that, say, has occurred in Northern California, or earthquakes, or flood damage. There has been a huge amount of discussion in the property tax community over the past 2 to 3 weeks about whether Section 170 claims can be made for the COVID pandemic. And we can't get into here to all the legal nuances that exist there. We do know that, generally speaking, physical damage has been required. There's a question about what type of damage does COVID-19 create, and that's an issue that's going to have to be worked out. There's also the question of can misfortune and calamity claims be today?
We're losing you.
Hello?
Chris, can you hear me?
If you are not presenting, you can make sure that your phone is on mute.
Hello?
Thank you.
That's better. Chris, are you still there?
I am still here. I'm sorry about that. I don't know who that was. Let me continue. There's been some discussion about whether taxpayers could file misfortune and calamity claims today, and some have, and whether existing legal standards would permit that. I believe that it might be necessary to amend the statute to allow for that, to allow for an economic damage claim. And I know in my write-up I had put it would be required. I was probably a little strong. I would probably say that it might be necessary. One thing that's going to happen, though, is there's going to have to be some decisions made, and it may be by a court, or it may be by the Court of Appeal, or even our Supreme Court, as to whether COVID-19 qualifies as a misfortune and calamity event and would support misfortune and calamity claims. If there is such a court challenge, and I think it's possible that could happen, it would delay the implementation of misfortune and calamity claims that would be filed this year. It could be for 2 years or 3 years. And that kind of undermines the desire to get relief right now for taxpayers right now in the medium term. Another method that has been talked about is simply to move the date of value. I said that January 1st is the important date for the present tax year. Perhaps it would require, I believe, a statutory change, but the date of value for this year only, because of COVID-19, would be moved to, say, July 1st. Then all the information that exists as of July 1st would be available to assessors, to appraisers as they evaluate properties. And I realize, as Mr. Gakel has said, that there are not going to be a lot of sales, but there's going to be a lot of income about what's happened to rental income, rental rates, or rent at all being received. And that would be important in determining what are property values as of July of this year. A third method that could be put in place as a medium-term solution that would resolve the problem now, that could give relief to taxpayers now, is to change the evidentiary standard temporarily for property tax appeals that are filed this year. And what I mean by that is, as Mr. Gakel said, currently the law allows assessors and taxpayers to look at sales that occur within the first 90 days of the year. And using that information, they can determine what is the value of their property as of January 1, 2020. It would be possible, it would require a statutory change for this year to push that date out, say, to 180 days after January 1st, or maybe 270 days out past January 1st. Another alternative would be that and this possibly could be even done administratively by the State Board of Equalization, to change the evidentiary standard this year to allow assessors and assessment appeals boards to look at market conditions after January 1st. Current law, which is some judicial law, it's not always directly on point, but it says that we basically are limited to what was known and knowable as of January 1st of a year. But I think it could be possible, either by statute or maybe by administrative ruling, to say for this year we're going to allow assessors and taxpayers to look at what was known or knowable, say, as of July 1st, or maybe as of September 30th. That would allow values for the current tax year, when they've been appealed, to consider the COVID-19 impact. And again, these suggestions that I'm making are only for this year, because we have a once-in-a-century pandemic, and we need, I think, a once-in-a-century kind of relief to help taxpayers now in the medium term, before a lot of property owners lose their properties in foreclosure, have to go to bankruptcy, businesses are shuttered because they don't have revenues, their property values are down, and as was mentioned, even the tax rolls could be impacted because taxpayers won't have the money to pay their taxes. Those are the three suggestions that CADA wants to bring forth on the medium-term issues. And with that, I'm going to turn matters back over to Mr. Waldman.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. And now next we're going to have our final speaker will be Wes Nichols. He's a board member of CADA. And he's going to talk about some of the things that we consider as long-term issues, particularly in dealing with various assessment appeal load issues, et cetera. Wes, are you available?
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you, Board Member Vasquez, for setting this up. Talking to you, I know that you really care a lot about small businesses, and we're here to help service this, and we want to share with you some ideas. Now, long term, some of the ideas that we have, and I will share with you, I know that we're going to have probably future meetings and topics and discussions on, but we wanted to at least address them and to start the conversation. So the one is preparing for the tsunamis of appeals filed in July of 2021. As Mr. O'Neill had described, we can't really win right now, or there's not much reduction for 2020 for most properties. But for 2021, we anticipate. As far as what that anticipation is, we don't know the exact numbers, but we could probably identify similar numbers that what we saw back in the last recession of 2009 to 2012. This is going to be a little bit different than the last recession. In my personal opinion, this is going to be reverse of how it was in the past in 2008, 2010. Currently, we believe that the property value decreases will be for hotels, travel, and the retail and restaurant industries first. Then we'll be seeing reductions in value of apartments due to increase in cap rate and increase in risk. Then we'll also start seeing reductions in offices. We'll start going down in values because more employees are working from home and less demand for office space. Finally, I believe the third phase of this property value decrease will be for single-family homes and other properties, just due to the fact that, in my opinion, we believe that the banks will delay foreclosing on properties, and this is will be extending or kicking the can down to have the properties eventually will be the lowest value coming in 2022, 2023. So as you can see, this is different than the 2008 recession, where majority of the appeals first were single-family residents and then commercial. This is going to be a complete reversal. Some of the solutions that we have or have came up with would be, one, to assist assessment appeals boards to handle more appeals. And how do we do that is, one, increase the number of boards for each county. Currently, smaller counties typically meet once a month. LA currently meets 5 times a week, Monday through Friday, 4 boards. So they're having 20 board hearings a week. We're in favor of them increasing that as much as possible. Allow more special hearings that will take longer, or in cases, oftentimes if one agent has many appeals, we can get as many done rather than having 20 cases spread out over 20 hearings. So currently LA does a good job where they'll schedule us for 20 cases and we just have that one hearing board itself. But in other counties, they'll schedule everybody on the same day, and it's just impossible to get it all done. But for example, if, say, my firm or another firm had all their cases or majority of their cases scheduled on one day, we can then anticipate getting most of them done and settled before, or if they go forward, we can get most of them done that day. The other item is we're going to need to support recruiting of new board members. Currently, most of the board members, I would say, are of the risk age or elderly, and most of them that we see or interact with are, I would say, 45, 50 years old plus. And so we're going to need to get new board members. And personally, I believe having board members with commercial real estate experience or who are active participants, such as a general certified appraiser or a market participant, such as a commercial real estate broker, really matters. Oftentimes, there's a discount between what's really going on versus what the data is being presented. And having these board members with local knowledge as well as timely experience is key. The other thing is improved training of board members. CADA has in the past offered to provide training on special topics such as intangibles or complex income approach. We are more than willing to provide training in person or via video conference if needed. CADA is blessed with members who are the top experts in complex valuations relating to property tax matters. We could, at your request, provide a list of special topics that we could provide education on to these board members. And we could roll it out statewide. The next would be increased salaries paid to board members. I know this was a topic in the past. We would be helpful in attracting and retention of current board members and extra hours needed. Many of these boards are typically meeting once a month, and they're now going to be meeting 3 to 4 times a week in some counties. The other would be create a mega board that handles appeals for multiple counties. Example would be having a hearing, say, scheduled in Fresno, but here the cases concerning properties in, say, counties like Kings or Merced County. The board members would be from surrounding areas and experts in the field. This would help smaller counties with acceleration of more hearings and having complex appeals be heard with more experienced board members. Also, in my opinion, would reduce costs too. The next one would be larger counties create boards to handle large cases. For example, why is this important? Well, each board member has their own expertise. Some might be an attorney and have a good understanding of law and procedures. Others might be experienced in single-family real estate sales. For these special boards, what is needed are board members who have experience to understand complex commercial issues, mostly relating to commercial real estate. Next would be changing assessment procedures to improve efficiency. Allow flexible 2-year waivers of the R&T code. I know prior speakers have suggested that we move or get rid of the 2-year extension. We can understand their concerns. However, the key is what's best for the taxpayers in this economy is the faster we can get money in the hands of the taxpayers and small business owners, the better for all of us. And what I mean by that is the faster the government can help out, the faster the government can get back to having the revenues that they anticipated and need. Some counties typically will schedule many hearings on one day and force many of us tax agents and taxpayers to sign waivers. Or if we refuse to, there's other consequences. Once the waivers are signed, oftentimes the hearings are not rescheduled for almost another year. Katie would suggest if we force to sign a waiver, maybe having limits on those extensions, such as 60 or 90 days. This would be difficult due to anticipated so many appeals. However, the key is the faster the government can issue refunds and settle cases, the faster and easy would be for small business to keep doors open, or simply can be the difference of keeping their business or bankruptcy. So this is why it's key. The faster we can do this, the better. The next would be develop ways to accelerate processing of appeals. One way to be more flexible on applications of errors or corrections. Recommend that tax agents have special hearings where we can schedule, say, 15 a day rather than 15 applications over 15 hearing days. One problem is I personally run into is sometimes I'm scheduled in 5 county assessment appeals boards in one day. Now, I have staff that can help out, but oftentimes I need to be there and can only do 1 county a day. The results of which are we're allowed to postpone a hearing, then we do not get a chance to choose when the next hearing date is. So oftentimes if a county postpones the first one, they'll then send out another letter on the next one. Well, if I'm already previously scheduled that day, then oftentimes we'll get denied for lack of appearance or denied for our request for another extension. If we had more flexibility or allowing us to maybe reach out to the county clerks and say, hey, here's all my cases I have with you in this county. Can I possibly start scheduling these out 6 months in advance or in advance so that we're fully prepared and my schedule's clear so I don't run into any conflicts? That would be just one idea for myself. The other suggestion would be is allow more hearing officers programs for large commercial. Currently in LA, the cap limit for assessed value for commercial hearing officer programs is $3 million. But if we had an ability to be able to sit down with each appraiser or each assessor and quickly get through these, the faster we can get these resolved. Section B would be increase the number of appraisers in assessor's office. Now, I know that the budget constraints and just heard that LA County put a hiring freeze on, so this is going to make it difficult. However, there are some alternative solutions. One, expand training programs to community colleges. I know in the past we spoke about it, and we're in favor of this. Also, another alternative would be, as it worked in San Diego, has had much success, is go out and recruit general certified commercial appraisers. Currently, the commercial appraisers are in need of work because there's not a lot of bank work, there's not a lot of sales. So there's an opportunity for county assessors to go out and hire and recruit already experienced general commercial appraisers. I know San Diego has had a lot of success in doing this, and I would also suggest more counties try to follow this model. Create an apprentice appraiser who can handle simple matters. Now, what I'm about to say here, I think, is a very important and easy solution. Currently, in my tax practice, I have a personal assistant or coordinator for my valuation staff. Now, why I did that is their responsibilities are to collect information from clients and help support our valuation team. The less administrative work my appraisers do, the better it is for my efficiency. Now, if the county assessor took the same model and assigned maybe a person for each region or each county, and their sole job was to do nothing but working with agents on gathering information for the appeal so that it can be sent to the correct appraiser. This would free up more time for the actual appraisers who are good at what they do, and that's valuing property, to spend more time doing that rather than calling or emailing me to get the information that I need to send to them. So finding a process to resolve that would help out as well. Also, this person can help schedule calls with agents and appraisers to go over the valuation and resolve the appeals. The next would be require assessor's office in larger counties to create an assessment appeals unit. Currently, Orange County and San Bernardino have this model, and frankly, it works really, really well. And why it works is I've got one person, or I've got 1 or 2 people that I know are working on appeals, and I can get a hold of them quickly, easily, and I know where and how to send the information to. Also, it's just easier to communicate, to work out valuations. It's easier to process resolutions and stipulations. And it's just honestly faster. We can also work out multiple years. In the past, we were able to work out resolutions for multiple years rather than just 1 year at a time. The next would be to improve tax payment and refund processing. So currently right now, expand plans for payment of escape taxes to help taxpayers. One idea would be to help taxpayers and assessor is if the assessor of the county were to delay the issue and mailing of supplemental or escape assessments by 1 year. This would free up workload from the assessor and would delay large new property tax bills for taxpayers. Or, in the spirit of this idea, would be allow more flexible payments. Some counties, currently Los Angeles County, has a 4-pay program. So if you're issued a supplemental or escape a bill, oftentimes these aggregate of these bills can be quite large. they allow a 4-pay system. I would like to suggest or support maybe an 8-payment program statewide. So any supplemental or escape tax bill would allow the taxpayer to be able to have those payments broken up over 8-period payments to lessen the burden. These escape and supplementals would be for recent purchased property, say in 2019, or new construction properties. And lastly, the establishment of timely payments and refund economic stimulus. The faster we can get money in the hands of business owners, the faster we can recover. Each county has different processing times for refund. The shortest is typically 1 to 2 months. However, most are typically 4 to 6 months. Currently, Riverside County, due to a new computer system we have appeals that we won over 2 years ago that the clients have not yet received refunds. Currently, there is to be a standard line is to issue refunds faster. If counties do not comply, there would be a penalty added to the refund. If property tax payers are held to pay by a certain date or penalties are incurred, then why can't the county government be held to the same timely demands? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Nick, Chris, and Wes. Members of the board, I hope we've been able to convey the issues that we're seeing in our capacities representing taxpayers in California. As you can see from our presentations, we put a great deal of research, thought, and discussion into these issues. We hope you'll consider some of the suggestions we've made today. That concludes Kata's comments. Again, we thank the board members, and staff for your time today, and welcome any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call the next speaker.
The next speaker is David Wolf, Legislative Director, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Mr. Wolf, are you on the line?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Vasquez and members. Actually, good afternoon now. I'm David Wolf. I'm the Legislative Director at the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. HJTA is the largest grassroots taxpayer association in California with nearly 200,000 members, mostly homeowners. I've been asked to speak for a couple minutes today, and in deference to the other people on the call, I will only be speaking for a couple of minutes regarding how homeowners are dealing with the confusion and lack of uniformity relating to the April 10th property tax deadline. For weeks prior to this deadline, HJTA pushed for the governor to issue an executive order to either postpone the April 10th property tax deadline or waive late fees and penalties for those taxpayers unable to pay due specifically to COVID-19. We understood that the governor was unlikely to issue an executive order prior to this deadline, and indeed he did not, because it would have temporarily denied counties their largest source of revenue in the midst of a pandemic. Also, because of its own pending revenue shortfall, it would have been difficult for the state to temporarily backfill billions of dollars of delayed property tax revenue out of the general fund. That said, an executive order would have been the easiest way to confront this problem for hundreds of thousands of homeowners who have been economically impacted by COVID-19 and whose property taxes are not paid via escrow accounts. We presume that affects about 20% or so of homeowners across the state of California based on some existing data. Because the governor didn't act, the issue fell to counties and treasurer tax collectors to deal with. We understand that the treasurer tax collectors' hands are tied a little bit because they lack the statutory authority to waive late fees and penalties for property tax payments, specifically for issues of economic hardship. And obviously, I know this has been discussed already today in this hearing. In the week and a half since the deadline, it's our anecdotal understanding from taxpayers that treasurer tax collectors are indeed waiving late fees and penalties for homeowners directly impacted by COVID-19. We're continuing to watch the situation closely to ensure that this continues. And finally, and this has obviously been discussed during this hearing as well, when the legislature resumes session, HJTA is eager to support pending legislation that will retroactively waive late fees and penalties specifically for economic hardship conditions in light of COVID-19. With state unemployment soon to be approaching 13%, there must be a statutory definition of what applies when we use the term economic hardship. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call the next speaker.
The next speaker is Raymond Blatt, partner, Blatt & Sorrell Tax Group, Inc., a member of the International Association of Assessment Officers, IAAO. Mr. Blatt, are you available?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Thank you.
Can you make sure that you turn your volume down. You have an echo. If you have two phones in the room, please turn the volume down on one. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for allowing me to speak. I'm a tax practitioner along with my partner, Stephen Terrell. We have over 6 years of combined experience. I'll make this brief. Typically, when a business closes their books at the end of the year, we get the information, maybe February, March. This year, we've gotten very little information because of the stay-at-home order the staff had, coupled with a number of employees being ill. We are in need, the relief of having the extension from May 7th to at least 40 days and the waiver of the penalty. We would appreciate it very much. We have clients in most of the counties. We have one client in Monterey where we process 15 tax returns. In Tulare and Fresno, a client that just merged with a very large farm organization where there's 40 property tax returns involved, et cetera, et cetera. So anything the board can do to assist our effort, I really would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Mr. Reed Schreider, Property Tax Director, PricewaterhouseCoopers, LLP. Mr. Schreider, are you available?
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable board members. My name is Reed Schreider. I'm a director with the accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers and assist clients with a variety of property tax matters. Thank you for the opportunity today to comment on the property tax administrative impacts on taxpayers of the COVID-19 pandemic. I will speak generally to the experience of some of our clients that engage in a variety of business activities, including commercial real estate, hospitality, retail, and service industries. Despite their different business activities, they are all facing similar problems. We've all heard about these problems on the news, but they are real. They're experiencing reduced income due to tenants not paying their rent, the required closures of retail locations, customers required to stay home, closure of their own business facilities, and staff required to work remotely. As a result, cash flow and thus cash on hand is significantly reduced for many, forcing businesses to make choices among competing demands. Should limited cash be used to pay outstanding bills, mortgages, loans, rent, payroll, or taxes? Further, because their own staff are working remotely, it may be difficult to process checks, gather information for tax returns, and obtain required signatures and approvals. Compounding these problems for many taxpayers is that they are facing these demands in multiple jurisdictions, not just one jurisdiction in California or just in California. All recognize that the payment demands are normal demands of business operations, and there is no question about the need to satisfy all these payments. The problem comes down to the limits on resources. Keep in mind, we're not talking about poorly managed businesses or those on the verge of closing their doors before COVID-19. Instead, these are well-run, well-managed businesses that, as of 5 or 6 weeks ago, were thriving, and all are working to adapt to the current situation. There is no question that these are unusual times or that the government is facing many of the same issues that businesses are facing. The difference lies in the fact that the government controls the framework within which businesses operate, and thus is the one with the power and authority to make temporary changes to the framework to assist everyone through the difficult but hopefully temporary time. And I intentionally emphasize the word temporary there. So what to do? Specifically, what can government do? The extension of filing and payment due dates for many taxes has been a great help. As already stated, because of limits of cash on hand, it is difficult for many taxpayers to pay all outstanding demands currently, including the recent April 10th real property tax installment. In addition, many taxpayers are still working to put into place processes to remotely generate checks and provide wet signatures on those documents that require them. With respect to the April 10th real property tax payment due date, taxpayers appreciate the extension some jurisdictions have offered, and the stated flexibility in penalty relief others have described. However, a case-by-case review of each penalty relief application does not seem practical or a good use of limited government resources, and it does not provide taxpayers with any guidance or guarantee of consistency. It would be helpful if jurisdictions would either provide guidelines as to what qualifies as acceptable reasons for failure to pay the tax timely, so the taxpayers can be sure to describe that in their applications, or better yet, provide a one-time blanket waiver of penalties. Yes, some taxpayers may receive relief that do not deserve it, but I expect the better good of assisting deserving taxpayers outweighs this on a one-time basis. A one-time extension to the upcoming May 7th filing deadline for the business property statement would also be helpful. Right now, many taxpayers face challenges for a variety of reasons, such as competing deadlines across jurisdictions, access to the required records, and staff working remotely. A 30-day automatic extension of this deadline would be helpful. Assessors could also use the authority granted in California Revenue Taxation Code Section 170 to proactively reduce property tax assessments for specific time periods related to the COVID-19 pandemic. These would be temporary reductions that would not require taxpayers to file applications or appeals and would recognize the current reductions in value rather than only future reductions that might occur if we wait until next year. The reductions could be standardized for specific business activities, much as assessors currently use index factors and percent good factors published by the Board of Equalization to perform mass appraisals of business property reported on the annual business property statements. Once the economy reopens, the assessments could be phased back to their previous levels as the economy again finds its footing. If government doesn't act proactively in some of these areas, we can expect the appeal system to be immediately overwhelmed and unable to process all the appeals for penalty relief and valuation reductions that will result. And we've heard some of the previous speakers addressing this issue. This would only extend the current crisis beyond the period of the pandemic. Further, it would have caused both government and taxpayers to increase spending without the additional increase in revenue. These are not good outcomes for anyone. So a recognition that the best way to work through the current difficulties is to recognize that we're all in this together and that together we can find the answers. Thank you again for the opportunity to participate today.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call the next speaker.
The next speaker is the Honorable Lawrence E. Stone, Santa Clara County Assessor.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My comments will address a single topic primarily, and that's the May 7th filing deadline for the 571 Business Personal Property Statement. Virtually everything in an assessor's office is on an annual 12-month cycle, ending with the close of the assessment roll, which is our constitutional responsibility. Within that 12-month cycle, there are many deadlines, some statutory, some internal. The real property division, the business division, and even exemptions have different deadlines. Any change in a major deadline simply compresses our work within that annual cycle. We simply can't add a 13th month to handle an overload or a crisis. As a manager, I love deadlines. Yeah, they can be difficult, but they also promote work discipline, consistency, and efficiency. So consider the May 7th filing deadline for business personal property statements. Why is this deadline so important? Well, in Santa Clara County, we have some of the largest, most successful companies in the world. Google, Apple, Adobe, Intel, HP, LinkedIn, NVIDIA, the list goes on, all headquartered in Santa Clara County. My county enrolls $35 billion in business assessments every year. That's $350 million in property tax revenue. That's greater than the total assessment roll in 24 counties. We're second only to Los Angeles. Most of the major corporations file their 571 on or near the May 7th deadline. In fact, 82% have already filed so far in Santa Clara County. In Santa Clara County, we close the assessment roll by the statutory deadline July 1st every year. We do not ask for the extension of 30 days or now 40 days for the reasons I stated previously, plus a very important reason that I can explain if you ask. In order to meet the July 1st roll close deadline, I must shut down inputting all activities around June 15th to enable our legacy computer system to process everything for the July 1st roll close. Consequently, between May 7th and June 15th, slightly less than 6 weeks, I have to process and enroll the major portion of $35 billion of assessed value from some of the world's largest companies. Any extension of the May 7th deadline will result in failure to assess and enroll several billion dollars in assessed value. That is the message I conveyed to the governor. There would be a loss of property tax revenue which benefits the state, schools, and local government. That is why assessors were united in conveying to the State Board of Equalization, don't mess with the May 7th statutory deadline. I don't know if you know this or not, but the May 7th deadline was negotiated between corporate tax managers and assessors more than 20 years ago. Industry tax managers argued successfully that because of the corporate income tax filing deadline was in April, they didn't have sufficient time to prepare their business property statement any earlier. Well, this year the income tax deadline has been extended to July 15th, which should give corporations more time, not less time, to focus on property tax. Yesterday I spoke to John Despotakis, the senior tax manager of Apple. He said that Apple will have no problem in meeting their May 7th deadline. He said any decent software system with access to servers should be able to meet the deadline. In fact, what I just said, 82% of taxpayers in Santa Clara County have already filed their 571L, and it's April 21st. Assessors recognize the significant decline in property values that we expect as a result of COVID-19. We understand that this hardship will be pervasive and extensive. We hope to be prepared for that. We support acceptance of electronic filing in lieu of wet signatures. We agree with giving assessors authority to waive penalties for late filing as a result of COVID-19. We strongly support CADA's desire to increase the relevant experience and professional credentials of AAB members. But let me just, we disagree, however, with the CADA recommendations such as changing the in lieu date, allowing misfortune and calamity claims for economic declines in property values, and changing the evidentiary standard in assessment appeals. We just disagree with those. But let me be clear. I've had a number of years now to meet and deal with CADA. CADA's objective, in my opinion, has always been to deny or make it impossible for assessors to receive accurate information that assessors need to make accurate and timely assessment. In 2008, CADA repeatedly opposed AB 2425, a simple bill that allowed assessors to require the electronic transmission of data and information when responding to a 441D request for information. They opposed electronic transmission back then, but now they want electronic transmission of filing their forms. If they can delay and avoid providing the required information, they can force assessors to make estimates, what we call guesstimates. If an assessor guesses low, then they accept the assessor's value. If the assessor guesses too high, then they file an appeal. The point is this: we need information, accurate information in a timely manner in order to do our jobs. And whenever we're obstructed from doing that, then it's not good for the taxpayer, nor is it good for assessors. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call the next speaker.
The next speaker is the Honorable Jeffrey Prang, Los Angeles County Assessor. Mr. Prang, are you available?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Equalization. I appreciate the invitation to join you on this call this morning, and I want to thank the chair and all the members of the board for your interest and the hard work that you've been doing to work with assessors to try to help us address the mutual challenges that we are having in administering our component of the property tax chain, which has been a challenge for not only taxpayers but for assessors and everyone else who has a piece of property tax administration. One of the things that we are learning as we go along over the last couple of weeks is the more we dig into trying to resolve one issue, it seems to reveal that there's other nuances and down in the weeds sort of issues that also need to be addressed. And we're recognizing now that there's going to be probably a number of details we're going to have to address in the weeks and months ahead to help us do our job easier and to provide appropriate relief to taxpayers. So just a couple things that have been going on in LA County, which, as you know, is the most populous county in the United States with close to 11 million residents. Due to the impact of COVID-19, we've had a high volume of inquiries regarding property tax. We, like I'm sure like other assessors as well, are enduring is the mass confusion about who does property taxes and who does assessments. So we're dealing with a lot of issues that are appropriately directed to the treasurer and tax collector. We also are expecting a high number of impacts on the local assessment roll, since local government is primarily funded by sales and property taxes, but sales taxes are at a have significantly dried up, and that the reliance on the efficiency of assessors to maximize the assessment roll every year is at a premium. However, that will be complicated, at least in Los Angeles County. We have been, the Board of Supervisors has enacted a hiring freeze, which will slow down our ability to hire assessment role generating appraisers and other adjacent positions. There's also been a hiring freeze placed on all supplies, services, and for all county departments. We have been very successful in getting our employees to work from home. Somewhere between 85 and 95% of our employees are now teleworking out of a total employment complement of roughly 1,400 employees. We have lost some production hours in making this transition. Some technology challenges do slow down certain functions within the department based on the different type of equipment that people have at home. There are some employees that their jobs don't lend themselves well to teleworking. On the plus side, because assessment appeals have all but ceased, a lot of personnel production hours that we would be dedicating to appeals, we're now able to focus on assessment role generating activities. Obviously, COVID-19 is going to have a significant impact on the business community, since property owners have many businesses as tenants. If they're not paying rent, that creates a whole domino effect of tenants not being able to pay, property owners perhaps not being able to pay their mortgages, and the impact of what will happen when businesses begins to return to a sense of normalcy. We anticipate that there will be a lot of businesses that simply are unable to come back. We'll monitor that very closely in the months ahead to see if that has an impact on property values, as it seems obvious that the premium rents that have been charged for the last several years will probably be a little bit more challenging in the future and may cause an impact on values for more recently purchased property. Whereas one of the questions that has come up quite a bit is why has not LA County extended property tax deadlines? One, I always remind people that I'm not the tax collector, so that's not within my jurisdiction. However, there are a number of counties that made a decision on how their government would operate or not operate during the crisis, which gave them flexibility. LA County did not shut down our government and did not have the power or legal authority to extend the property tax deadlines. I did want to add my voice to that of Assessor Larry Stone regarding the concerns about the May 7th business property filing deadline. We concur completely with his analysis. We do support the CAA position that would provide additional discretion to assessors to support a waiver of late payments for the May 7th personal property filing deadline. I would go further and suggest that after that deadline passes, that we even consider granting a blanket waiver for a specific period of time to those who, due to COVID, are challenged in getting in meeting the May 7th compliance date. The issue has been raised a couple of times regarding a reduction in value and citing, I think it was Revenue Taxation Code Section 170, misfortune and calamity. I have not spoken to any assessors through the California Assessors Association or our county council who believes that there is any legal that M&C provisions apply to economic disaster. I would say personally, from a policy perspective, I see no reason why it should not, but the law does not allow for an economic impact to be considered in terms of misfortune and calamity. Happy to consider any evidence to the contrary, but we've taken a pretty thorough look at that, and it just doesn't seem like it's an alternative that is available to us. If properties are impacted by a decline in value as a result of this crisis, that will be reflected on the lien date of 2022. There are a couple of other items I wanted to address as well. One of them, I think a representative from CADA had talked about finding alternative ways to hire personnel within assessors' offices, including working with community colleges. I wanted to just report that I've worked with Chairman Vasquez and other members of the board and the Assessors Association. We have been actively exploring, looking for other vehicles to hire, train, and onboard additional appraisers. We've been doing this for a number of months in anticipation of a potential adoption of the split roll measure in November. Obviously, from LA's perspective, an alternative approach to hiring and training appraisers outside of the government would be beneficial to us. We're simply unable to hire the number of people we need and train them and keep up with annual attrition. It would be useful for us with or without split roll. However, at least with the hiring freeze in LA County, that seems to be, at least in the short term, it seems to be a moot issue. I think most assessors would probably agree, that should split roll be adopted in November. I have no real insight about where that seems to be going at this point. But with a hiring freeze, split roll is going to be a very difficult hill for us to climb, even without a hiring freeze. But with a hiring freeze, it'll be a near impossible task for us to implement. Should be adopted. And finally, I wanted to touch briefly on the assessment appeals. I'm hoping that, at least for Los Angeles County, that the crisis will provide us an opportunity to look at some of the elements of the appeals process and give us an opportunity to identify efficiencies to make it to ensure that taxpayers have an opportunity for a fair and expedient hearing. Although there's going to be because we've not been processing appeals for a number of weeks now, and it may be a whole lot longer, that backlog is going to be significant. I have advocated for the 5 years that I have been assessor in LA County that, at least for Los Angeles County, that we should consider a different approach from in appointing assessment appeals board members. Currently, they're part-time appointees of the Board of Supervisors. They're paid a stipend. The board just recently agreed to increase the stipend, but the challenge is, prior to COVID, we had a backlog of 27,000 cases. We could have kept full-time. We have 5 assessment appeals boards. We could have kept them busy for about 2 years, just at a full-time basis, just handling the volume that we have now. But they're not full-time. They're part-time. Some members only give a couple hours a week. I think it's time that LA County consider an alternative structure, maybe even full-time hearing officers or something similar to the administrative law judge program that they have at the state for a number of their appellate functions. We could also generate a lot of efficiencies if we were able to have remote testimony by frankly, by all participants. I have a number of district offices. My appraisers have to drive downtown to physically attend assessment appeals hearings. It would allow them to stay in production for longer periods of time if they could testify remotely as opposed to coming downtown and sometimes having to wait for a very long time just to find out that all the cases they were scheduled to testify on were continued or withdrawn. And I continue to be an advocate in LA County to adopt a filing fee for assessment appeals, primarily to deal with a number of tax agents who have fiscalized the assessment appeals process by filing thousands of unwarranted cases, which have really gummed up the process for other more meritorious appeals. So those are the major issues I wanted to touch on. And Chairman Vasquez, thank you very much for the opportunity to be a part of this hearing, and I'm happy to stay around and answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll definitely chat in a little bit. Ms. Davis, you call the next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Jeffrey Meyer, Chief of the Assessment Appeals Division of the Los Angeles County Assessor's Office.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Very good. Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Vasquez and Honorable Board of Equalization members. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Jeff Meyer from the County of Los Angeles. I'm the Chief Appraiser overseeing the Assessment Appeals section within the Assessor's Office. I've worked for the County Assessor for over 29 years, primarily in our Major Real Property Division as well as our Assessment Appeals section. I believe that assessors' thoughts and concerns have been well represented by the fine assessors from across the state today, including Los Angeles County's own Jeffrey Prang, though I still have a few comments and responses I'd like to make to some of the suggestions that have been out there today. I am going to wing it just a bit. I had some prepared comments, but since everything has been so thoroughly covered, I don't want to waste a lot of time. So
I appreciate that.
Thank you. So I think everybody's anticipating a large spike in appeals this coming year and for the years to follow. I expect that we're going to see a large increase in appeals for the year 2020, our current year, though I think that assessors are going to be very limited in how we can address any or the viability of any reductions for 2020 as the COVID-19 arose after the lien date and were required to value property as of the lien date. I think Mr. O'Neill of CADA expressed some suggestions on how they might be addressed, and I just wanted to make a few comments on those suggestions. The first suggestion he made was to allow misfortune and calamity claims under Revenue and Taxation Code 170. While I'm not taking a position on the issue, I will agree with Mr. O'Neill that it would require either an amendment to Section 170 or perhaps a new code section that would allow it. The assessor of LA County believes that 170 extends to physical damage and it doesn't address economic damage. So 170 actually gives a detailed metric on how the damage is calculated and reflected in the assessment, and it does not, and so you'd need some new metrics if it were extended to economic damage. The second suggestion that Mr. O'Neill made of moving the lien date for this year only from January 1st to July 21st, as Mr. O'Neill stated, would require, I believe, an amendment to the statute. This suggestion, however, could cause other administrative issues for assessors and likely tax collectors and auditor controllers. A change in the lien date would affect supplemental assessments and corresponding tax bills. Assessors, tax collectors, and auditor controller systems are built around the current lien date, and there's costs of administering the necessary changes to the various programs should be considered. The third suggestion of allowing utilization of comparable sales and information beyond the 90 days would also likely take some legislative action. But even if the law allowed sales beyond the current 90 days, if the valuation date remains January 1, as an appraiser, I would still be required to make an appropriate adjustment for market condition. It's usually referred to as a time adjustment. Theoretically, if I make the appropriate adjustment, the value would remain unchanged. I'm adjusting it backward in time as if COVID-19 had not occurred, because it didn't as of the lien date. So I think there's a challenge with that suggestion as well. I just want to make you aware of those concerns that I would have, and with that, I'm going to wrap it up because I think everything else has been well covered.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call the next speaker.
The next speaker is Michael T. LeBeau, or if there is another representative on the call from Billy, LeBausen, and Miller, LLP. Mr. LeBeau, are you available? Is there another representative available from the firm? If not, we will move to the next speaker. The next speaker is Tom Parker, Deputy LA County Counsel for LA County AABs. Mr. Parker, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I started off thinking I'd be saying good morning, but good afternoon. Chair Vasquez and board members. For the record, my name is Thomas Parker, Deputy County Counsel for Los Angeles County. I've served as legal counsel to the LA County Assessment Appeals Board since 2014. I want to thank the State Board for holding this informational hearing today and the invitation to testify. You've heard a lot of the C-19 pandemic impacts, especially from Mr. McKibben of my county. So I just want to add to that prior to March 13th, our four panels averaged 300 hearings a week. Since we've been closed effective March 15th, and our building is currently closed until May 15th, who knows what happens then, we have been missing hearing days. I'm pleased to hear the executive director of the state board acknowledged that Revenue and Taxation Code 155 allows the state board to grant relief in cases of emergencies and or calamity to boards as well as to assessors. I would note that there is no published appellate case law on whether the state board may grant one or more relief orders pursuant to Revenue and Taxation Code 155. So I view that as an open interpretational question, and I don't think there's any law that anyone could cite that negates the possible interpretation of that statute to allow for multiple relief if it is warranted under the facts of the calamity or the emergency. The assessment appeals boards do request maximum flexibility in terms of whatever relief the state board thinks appropriate to us under Revenue Taxation Code 155. The AABs respectfully request one or more of the following relief options to be considered by the State Board of Equalization. Number one, an interpretation of the statute, Section 155, that allows a maximum available relief to any assessment appeals board requesting relief pursuant to that statute. Two, that the state board work with county organizations to seek either direct relief through a direct gubernatorial emergency order, or that the governor's delegation of emergency authority, which has been referred to earlier in this hearing, you continue to seek that grant of delegated authority to the state board to fully address the impacts of COVID-19 on the boards. The failure of the governor and the state board to find some way to assist assessment appeals boards is going to have a downhill financial effect, not only in local governments, but the state budget itself, as referred to by Mr. McKibben in referring to the impacts on how the state funds the schools. Local AABs also need clarification and guidance, as Mr. McKibben said, from the state board on what we can and cannot do in possibly holding virtual hearings during this pandemic. I am glad to answer any questions the state board may have. I thank you all again for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, can you please call I have the last speaker, is that correct? Or is there a couple more?
There are a few more speakers.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The next speaker is Marty DeCasian, attorney. Marty DeCasian.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Marty.
Good afternoon. Mr. Chairman, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. My name is Marty DeCasian. I'm the founder of DeCasian Law, which is a tax litigation firm based in downtown LA. We represent several major property owners throughout California and across the country that are impacted by COVID-19. So I'll keep my comments brief, but in the spirit of unity and cooperation that you and the members have brought to this meeting, Mr. Chairman, I wish everyone the best in health and safety during these incredibly challenging times. And I would say the same for the county assessors and the other county officials. Very much appreciate the feeling of cooperation and togetherness that you're bringing to this meeting, and I think that that's essential during these difficulties. So my remarks are going to center on Section 170 of the Revenue and Taxation Code, which relates to calamity and disaster relief. I'm coming at it from a bit of a different perspective. We know that for income tax purposes, taxpayers have received relief. The same can be said for sales and use tax. The assessors themselves deservedly have sought and obtained a relief to perform their duties. And property taxpayers, in the same vein, are also entitled to relief due to COVID-19. Under California law, taxpayers are entitled to reassessment mid-year after the lien date if there is diminution in the value of property as a result of restricted access to the property, where that restricted access was caused by the major misfortune or calamity. That is a direct quote from Revenue and Taxation Code Section 170A1. And I think that everybody on this teleconference would agree that California properties have suffered diminished value due to restricted access caused by COVID-19. I don't think there's any question about it. The calamity has caused, as other speakers have indicated, sweeping government mandates to close businesses, shelter people in place, and all this has had a devastating impact on income, rental income, consumer spending, which has caused property values to drop precipitously. This is a calamity in every sense of the term, and the provisions of Section 170 apply squarely. I say this without hesitation. I know others earlier have suggested that a statutory amendment might be necessary. I reject that. I strongly but respectfully disagree. No statutory amendment is needed. Assessor Prang, whom I deeply respect and look forward to continuing the dialogue, said that the statute didn't allow for it based on their review. I welcome the dialogue, but I take the opposite view. I think the statute clearly allows for it. The definition of physical damage includes diminished value based on restricted access. And so I would urge that these claims be processed and granted without delay, subject to proof, of course, and that no litigation should be necessary. These claims should move through the pipeline as quickly as possible, subject to all the restraints that the county officials indicated that make a lot of sense. But I would, in closing, urge first that the counties process these Section 170 claims without delay, that the assessment appeals boards, if there is any possibility of doing this, give calendar preference to these property owners that have been ravaged by this calamity. And I would urge this board, as it has done up until this point, to help facilitate this process with support and guidance for taxpayers, assessors, and assessment appeals boards so that we can have uniform and equal statewide assessment practices. I thank you for your time, and I'm here to answer any questions the members may have.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call the next speaker.
The next speaker is Joseph Vinatieri, Esquire, Billy, Lisbon, and Miller. Mr. Vinatieri, are you available?
I think Mr. Vinatieri had to sign off, but maybe one of his partners is there.
If no one is there from that firm, we have the last speaker.
Ms. Davis, you also have Marcy Berkman.
Okay. Let me go back up to Marcy Berkman, Counsel for Assessment Appeals Board of Santa Clara County. Ms. Berkman, are you available?
I am available. Do I need to press 10?
No, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Whoops. Hello?
Welcome.
We can hear you.
I am so sorry. I'm Marcy Berkman, Deputy County Counsel in Santa Clara County, and I'm counsel for the Assessment Appeals Board. I've been doing property tax matters for almost 15 years now. A couple of things I'd like to address are, firstly, the 2-year statute. To echo the sentiments raised by Tom Parker and others, we very much need the governor to either issue an order extending the 2-year statute or delegate that to the State Board of Equalization. A great many taxpayers on their applications enter unrealistically low opinions of value, which they're allowed to do by law, including opinions of $1 or $0. So you could have a multi-million-dollar property value where the applicant, particularly those with savvy agents, have put an unrealistically low opinion of value, hoping that the 2-year statute will lapse. And while we do try proactively to get waivers where possible during this COVID-19 pandemic when we're not having hearings, we're not always able to reach all applicants, and not all applicants are necessarily willing to enter into one. For some, they
especially those with savvy agents, would prefer to just let the 2-year period lapse and get their opinion of value entered, especially if it's a low ball or a $1 or zero opinion of value. Responding to Kata's issue about waivers and that in some places once they sign a waiver, their cases can languish for a year, I'd like to point out to the state board that under the law, whenever there's a waiver in place, the applicant or agent can revoke that waiver on 120 days notice. So what happens is if you have a waiver in place and you feel like it's taking too long, that waiver is tolling the 2-year statute from the day it was entered. You then give the clerk of the AAB notice that you're revoking the waiver, and 120 days after that notice is received, the 2-year statute starts ticking along again. So there is a remedy to make sure that cases don't languish forever. And at least in Santa Clara County, to the extent we're obtaining waivers from applicants because we can't hold hearings at the moment, it is our best effort. We're going to get them on the board as soon as we can be up and running again once the pandemic passes. As for remote hearings, I can only speak for myself as a lawyer and one who practices very heavily in the appellate world. I have serious qualms about due process for remote hearings. In the court context, the courts of appeals and the civil courts have stopped holding hearings. The Judicial Council last week issued an executive order extending the 5-year statute to bring a case to trial for an additional year. That's probably the closest analogy to the Board of Equalization's our 2-year statute. And in the civil context, what that is when you file a lawsuit, you have to bring your case to trial within 5 years or it's dismissed without prejudice. So the Judicial Council has issued an executive order extending that for a year because the civil courts recognize the serious due process issues in trying to conduct a trial any way other than by having all of your witnesses in the room so that your board members can, in real life and in real time with the people present, examine them for credibility, question them, and be there in a room with them, interacting with the witnesses and with the documentary evidence. So any procedural issues aside, to my mind personally, there's serious due process issues in trying to conduct quasi-judicial hearings remotely, especially because assessment appeals boards stand in the shoes of the civil court as the trier of fact in first instance. So just like normally you'd have the civil court and their decisions are given deference by the appellate court, in the same way the factual decisions rendered by the assessment appeals board stand like the decisions of a trial court and are reviewed for substantial evidence on review by the civil court. So I have serious qualms about trying to conduct hearings remotely. That said, I want to get our boards up and running as soon as we safely can. And, if it means, to the extent that it's possible, scheduling more hearings, we certainly have the authority to do that, as long as we can keep it at a speed that the assessor's office and the taxpayers can handle. In the interim, to the extent the taxpayers and the assessor in our county have the capability to do that at the moment, we are still reviewing value stipulations that are turned in via DocuSign and submitted to me as counsel to review. And I don't know to what extent the assessor's office and the taxpayers and their agents have the ability to do that now, but to the extent they do, I have the ability to receive and review them. And then as soon as we're able to, be back up and running and holding hearings, we'll set hearings for the Assessment Appeals Board to review those. Finally, several people have mentioned RTC 170, the calamity relief. I went through that back in the time frame after 9/11, when the State Board of Equalization at that time had passed what was then Property Tax Rule 139, I believe. It sort of dealt with the same sort of issue about restricted access following 9/11. People couldn't go into the airports, flights weren't flying, and all of that. And I think an important point is that the physical damage requirement comes to us from the Constitution. And the Constitution requires physical damage. And that was addressed in the Slocum case following 9/11 that I was involved with at that time. So it's very important to remember that that physical damage requirement comes from the Constitution itself. And I thank the board very much for the opportunity to participate and comment.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, please call I guess it's the last speaker?
This is the last speaker. Our last speaker is Kent Meyer, Assessment Counseling Services. Mr. Meyer, are you available?
Ms. Davis, this is Henry Nanjo. I think given the fact that he submitted a written comment, I can read it into the record for him.
Go ahead, Mr. Nanjo.
Okay. This is from Kent Meyer, Assessment Counseling Services. A declaration of emergency allows assistance from FEMA not to exceed $5 million. In order to receive assistance over that amount, a major disaster declaration must be requested by the governor and approved by the president. It would be better served if the BOE issued a statement that upon Governor Newsom's request to the president under the Stafford Act be recognized as the governor has declared a disaster in California. As evidence, see the letter written to President Trump, specifically the third paragraph on page 7, in which Governor Newsom writes, quote, I certify for this major disaster the state and local governments, continuing, ellipses, unquote. This recognition by the BOE should resolve the issue of whether or not a disaster occurred and whether or not Section 170, paren A, close paren 1, and paren A, close paren 3, close paren, apply. The date of disaster would begin with the stay-at-home order on March 19th. Pursuant to Section 170, the misfortune or calamity is in a region subsequently proclaimed by the governor to be in a state of disaster. This request for disaster relief from the president is subsequent to the calamity itself. No modification to current legislation is required. And that's the end of Mr. Meyer's comment.
Thank you.
And just to add, before we go on, I wanted to alert the chair, the board members, and the public that unfortunately at this time, this meeting was only scheduled to go until 2 o'clock. We are trying to contact the necessary entities to see if we can extend it, but we have not gotten confirmation of that. So if we do not get confirmation, the meeting will have to end at 2 o'clock. And my apologies for that.
Well, hearing that, what are our options legally, Henry? I guess, are we allowed to, I know if we adjourn, the meeting's over, but if we recess, are we able to recess so the meeting officially is not adjourned at 2, but rather just take a recess and then reconvene either, if it's the will of the members, for tomorrow or a later date, and still be within our legal rounds here?
So it is an option for the board to decide, or yourself as the chairman, to decide to recess the meeting and not adjourn. We would recess to another date. It would be viewed as a continuation of this meeting. For us to be able to do that via teleconference, we're going to have to try to get another reservation and explore when we can have the further date of this meeting. Technically, when we recess, we should indicate to what date we are recessing to. If you want, I can try to ask staff to see if we can determine what future date we can have a recess or we can continue this teleconference to.
That'd be great, because I was going to suggest or recommend to the members that we, I guess we have about 40, maybe a little less than 45 minutes left, is to at least maybe do a little Q&A, and then everybody have an opportunity to kind of give their comments, and then I'm sure it's going to hit 2, and if we could recess it, I would suggest that we recess it, and then this way we can reconvene without having to worry about, setting all the legalese in terms of having, ample time to post this meeting, because it's technically not an official meeting that has ended, and then get into really the action plan and the action items, because I know there's been a lot of good information shared with us today, and I have some thoughts and ideas of what actions we might want to take on the short term, but in terms of the midterm and long-term goals or action items that we might want to take might take a little longer, and I know we're not going to be able to do it in the time we have left. What are the thoughts and ideas of the other members? Sorry, I can't see hands, but if you could just identify yourself.
Member Vasquez, this is Ted Gaines.
Yes, go ahead.
And, I like the idea of extending the meeting to tomorrow if we need to do that. In terms of action items for today, I think we should segment it in terms of short-term action. What do we need to do today? What do we need to do in the months ahead? And, an area of concern that I think we could address would be this wet ink signature issue. And I think we could handle that through an advisory letter that we could send out to the assessors so they would have clarity from the BOE in terms of what our stance is on the wet ink issue. We want to make sure that the processes are able to take place, that we can expedite and get things done as fast as we can, given that we're operating in a new environment, employees actually working out of their homes and things of that nature. So anything that we can do to help expedite that process, I think we need to address and try to address it in this meeting, get that taken care of. Secondly, I think we have to have a discussion on the 40-day extension issue for Section 155. And then in relation to Section 170, calamity relief, I think we need to have a discussion and debate on that and what we can do in the near future. I don't think we have to make a decision today on that, and I'm open to discussion on all these issues. So that's my 2 bits. Thank you.
So it sounds like you're comfortable if let's go as late as, right up to 2, and then recess the meeting to a later date and not adjourn it.
That's right.
Other members?
This is Member Schaefer.
Yes, Vice Chair, go ahead.
Do we have any problem reaching the telecommunications company? We should be able to reach them, instantly all the time. They're there to serve us. Why are we getting into such a debate over their accessibility? I don't understand that.
I don't believe it's AT&T. I think it's the closed caption group. But they're trying to reach them right now.
Okay, and this is probably the last day we're going to be meeting like this. We'll get together in person next time.
I hope so.
Mr. Chair.
Is that Ms. Cohen?
Yes, hi.
Yes, go ahead.
I would definitely love a way to further explore extending today. Maybe we could take a break to determine if we can get resources to continue today, especially since presenters are here, they're on the line. I know that I have questions for our presenters that I'd like to continue, that I have questions for our presenters, and I would like to continue the discussion. It sounds like board proceedings could get some questions answered if we gave them 30 to 45 minutes to drill down and to take a break. So I guess my proposal is possibly take a break for 30 minutes to 45 minutes and then reconvene, and then perhaps board proceedings will have an answer for us as to whether or not we can continue with the discussion.
I'm open to that. I guess my only concern is that if, it's 2 o'clock, they say at 2 o'clock, if they cut us off, we won't even have an opportunity to come back. So I was kind of hoping we could at least, maybe, if nothing else, get into a little bit of the Q&A and maybe just have everybody have, some closing comments, and then hopefully they come up with an answer whether we can either continue it today or if we're able to recess it and either reconvene tomorrow or later today, either one.
Chairman Vasquez, this is Henry. At this point, we are trying to check with our various providers, service providers to find out what our options are. I will let you know I will get back on and let you know as soon as we find out. The challenge is Bagley-Keene has provisions to recess a meeting, but typically the recess is to later on that same day. I'm trying to research whether or not there's any precedent for recessing to another day. The challenge there is I don't know that the public necessarily knew that the meeting would go into a separate day, and I don't know what our availability of our speakers are. So that is some of the challenges we're trying to work out, but I will get back on as soon as I discover anything about the options. In the meantime, at this point, we are still working with a 2 o'clock cutoff for the meeting today. Again, we are trying to extend that as well, but I have not heard back from one or two of our service providers.
So that means we have 35 minutes as of right now. My thoughts is to just continue allowing folks to have an opportunity to give some closing comments, and then hopefully we hear back from Henry. I'm just afraid of taking a recess and then try to convene too close to 2, and then they say, sorry, you're done.
Chair Vasquez?
Yes.
Let's get our team working on it, and let's get a decision. We need to get on it. It's just as Member Schaefer said, I don't know why we can't get an answer quickly before 2 o'clock. And I think the meeting can proceed in the meantime, but let's get it done.
All right, we're going to go with that. Let's assume we're going to get an answer here before 2 o'clock. So let me just give you my thoughts real quick, and then I'll ask the rest of you to chime in.
Chairman Vasquez?
Yes.
One of the challenges is we're trying to contact the captioner, and the captioner is captioning this meeting as we speak. Can we take a 5-minute break to try to contact the captioner to find out if he can go beyond 2 o'clock?
Yes, that's fine. I'm good with that.
Okay, if we can take a 5-minute break, I believe it's 1:26 now. Let's start up at 1:31, and in the meantime, if the captioner is hearing this, the captioner's company will be contacting the captioner to see if they could go beyond 2 o'clock today. And I will let you know as soon as we hear.
Question, if I could, Member Gaines?
Yes, go ahead.
Can we just stay online, and we'll put it on mute?
That's what I was going to do. Is that okay?
That's what I would recommend.
The operator, please keep all lines connected.
Yes.
Until you resume. And if the captioner is online, you can press 1 and then 0 if you can hear this message. So again, keep all lines connected. If the captioner is online, please press 1 and then 0 at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take a recess here until 1:31. Please mute your phone, and then we'll be back. Thank you.